Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. Today is Tuesday, and you never know what you're gonna get when it comes to co-hosts. We got something special for you today, and a docket of Supreme Court-related stories for you as well. They're gonna play into his background quite well. Charles F. Coleman Jr. joins us once again. Charles, how's it going?
Good to be here, John. Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always glad to have you here. Very excited to have you on, and particularly talk about some of the topics that we've got. I did want to let people know right off the bat, we aim to teach you at least 2 to 3 things a day. You know, we don't want to go too crazy, but 2 to 3 facts. I have a fact for you. We're gonna start off really fast. You may not know, but Charles is on Twitter and you should follow him. Charles, where can they find you?
You can find me on the Twitters at CF Coleman Jr. Again, that's CF Coleman Jr. You can just type in my name, Charles Coleman Jr., and you get it. Really simple, right there, hit that follow button, and there you go.
You know what? And I'm gonna be seeing how many people sign on. Come on, everybody. Charles is awesome. Show some support. And in return, we're gonna give you some news. That's what we're gonna do. We got 90 minutes of awesome news for you. Not awesome in that it's good. This is America after all, but it's gonna be interesting. So hold on to your butts. We got that coming for you. Updates on the battle to have a democracy. Most of America is on fire. We're gonna check in with the smoking ruin of the Pacific Northwest. We've got the next phase of QAnon. What do you do when people have been turned off by the label? Well, we'll let you know in just a little bit. And as the headline for the stream says, the Trump org is doing their last ditch effort to avoid some sort of criminal charges. And then we got a whole bunch more. Congressmen associating with anti-Semites, but I repeat myself anyway. And more stuff than just that. So thank you everybody for being here. Please hit the like button, share the stream if you haven't already. And if you want to send us comments, tweets, concerns, super chat, stuff like that, we'll respond as we go. With all that said, Charles, would you like to jump into the news?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, everybody. I just checked Twitter. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
I did.
Anyway,
they are awesome.
I mean, keep going.
They are awesome. I did.
They are. Anyway, okay. With that, now let's go to the news. It wasn't that long ago that the Republicans filibustered the For the People Act, because of course they were gonna do that. They filibustered the bipartisan bill, bipartisan in that both Democrats and Republicans out there across America support it. You just can't get a single Republican senator to support it. So what's gonna happen? Well, Joe Biden is responding by meeting with advisors and experts, figuring out their next step. They put out a statement from the White House saying the president and his staff highlighted ways that the administration will continue working with Congress to pass critical legislation and ramp up engagement with the American people on voting rights. The president also reiterated his unwavering determination to win the fight to protect the sacred right to vote in free and fair elections. He said that he would speak more on the issue this week. That's what he said when it was filibustered, though it's unclear when that's gonna happen. He has said, I'm gonna be going around the country making the case to the American people that this isn't just about showing identification or being able to give someone water in line. This is about who is able to judge whether your vote gets counted. But as of right now, and I understand he is starting to travel. Supposedly, I believe he's gonna go to Miami. He might do some other trips too, we'll see. Maybe he'll talk about it there. But so far, the response to the filibuster of one of the core pieces of his first term agenda has been super muted. And in response, a lot of activists and progressive politicians have an issue with it. Cliff Albright, who's one of the co-founders of Black Voters Matter, said they're checking the boxes. They're not acting like we're facing an existential crisis. That's the problem. It's from the top down. And Charles, yeah, so far, I mean, I get that they're not gonna seem super shocked by the filibuster, but they don't seem that aggrieved by it either. It seems like, yeah, okay, maybe we'll get around to it at some point.
You know, John, I tend to agree, and I think that the administration is making a very, very bad miscalculation on how much their sort of, I don't want to call it ineptitude, but their unwillingness to really go hard around this filibuster, even as it may have been expected, is going to play with some of the base that they need to turn out both for midterms and then for the larger presidential election. I think that they're taking for granted that they're going to be able to just point to Republicans and say it's their fault. That's why it didn't get done. I mean, we've seen now Merrick Garland and the DOJ get involved in terms of litigating some of this on the court front. I think that was the smart thing to do. But I also think that the case, in terms of going around the country, the narrative has to be framed properly, because even for him to say this is not about IDs, this is about who gets to judge, who gets to participate in democracy. Let's break down that statement first and foremost. The latter part of it, when you're talking about who gets to judge about participating in democracy, is a direct allusion to white nationalism, because it's about the decision around who has access to our processes, who is the civic process of America supposed to work for, and who can participate in that. That is at the core of white nationalist ideology. Call it what it is. Like, be courageous enough to call it what it is. The first part, this is not about IDs, is really a dangerous sort of playing into, I think, GOP narratives and conservative narratives around the ease at which, or the perceived ease at which, people can access the democratic process. People take for granted, especially if you live in a metropolitan area, that these things are not necessarily as inconvenient as other places. If you live in Alabama, for example, there are parts of Alabama where it's 50 miles to the nearest DMV from anyone's house. They don't have an extensive public transportation system, and many people who are residents actually survive on public assistance with state issued IDs. So what happens when those people who work every single day, who already have a state issued ID, are told that their state issue ID that they have on public assistance is no longer good to allow them to vote? They go to work Monday through Friday, the DMV, which is 50 miles away, and they don't drive, is the only place that they can go to get a proper ID. I think framing it in those terms makes people sort of understand, wow, this is a real issue. As opposed to someone who lives in a city. I live in New York. I can take a bus or a train or walk or take an Uber to the DMV, and I'm there in less than 20 minutes. So I think some of us take for granted that when you talk about or dismiss the notion that, oh, well, this just isn't about IDs, so on and so forth, you're already allowing them to frame the narrative in a way that misconstrues it, so that the American public doesn't understand the severity of this problem. And secondly, again, you have to be able to call it what it is. This is white nationalism at its core. But in total, John, I really think that if he is not much more vocal and aggressive about calling out the forces that are pushing against this in a real way, that whole notion of, well, we tried, Republicans stopped it, is not gonna be enough for voters.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be. Right. After all they did in the last election. Yeah, so I wanna ask you a couple quick follow-ups about some stuff we've been talking about. So one is, I've seen an attempt to push back specifically against, you just described how in some areas this identification is relatively easy to get, in some it's much more difficult. The Republican response, I don't remember if it was Ted Cruz or Rick Santorum or whoever, they're all basically the same human. They said the idea that only one race has a hard time getting identification is by definition racist. So if you express a concern that some people might be disproportionately inconvenienced by this, that is a racist statement. Is there anything to that?
No. I mean, that's my short answer. And I think the overarching idea is, let's just for a moment, let's just imagine that we are going to accept that statement, at least part of that statement, as being valid, i.e. that, it's not just one group that has a problem getting ID. This doesn't disproportionately affect any particular race. It affects us all, or it affects a number of different people who have difficulty getting ID. Well, in the wake of not having actual evidence of voter fraud or widespread voter fraud, which we have been waiting for literally for years now, since President Obama was running for office, these unfounded claims of voter ID in widespread instances have never ever been substantiated, right? So in the absence of that, why are you making it more difficult for anyone of any race to be able to participate in American democracy?
Yeah.
So even if I accept what you're saying is true, which I do not for a number of reasons, but even if I accept what you're saying as being true, your overall conclusion is faulty, because you're just basically saying, I'm still okay with this being a harder process for people to access because it's harder for everybody, despite the fact that it's a fundamental tenet of our American democracy. Now, picking apart the actual nuance within the statement, it's also not true, because if you look at the places where there are voter ID laws and are voter ID restrictions, and the places that are disproportionately affected, they are overwhelmingly filled with people of color. They are overwhelmingly Black and brown people. So the statement itself from a factual place is false. And there are a number of structural inequities which further contribute to how, when properly contextualized, it's nonsensical. So yeah, the answer, it's a no all around. And even if it were a yes, why would you want to make it harder for people to vote when there's no evidence that the widespread voter fraud that you're claiming to guard against even exists?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know why.
Well, right, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. So Biden seems to be taking the fact that the For the People Act was filibustered really in stride. He doesn't seem that worried about it. Doesn't really seem like many politicians are that worried about it. I wish that they were a little bit more worried about it. That said, there are some things that are coming up having to do with voting rights that I think we should throw into the mix. I understand that all of this is going to be going on during the backdrop of maybe they do something about the For the People Act, maybe they don't. So we know, baked into the situation since January, in Georgia, Florida, Iowa, Arkansas, and Montana, they've already passed and signed new bills to make voting more difficult in a ton of different insidious ways. Dozens of additional efforts are pending. As Charles pointed out, the Justice Department announced last Friday that it was filing a major voting rights case challenging a sweeping new voting law in Georgia, one of the biggest voting cases the department has filed in recent years. So far it's only challenging that one. Now, really fast, Charles, what are your hopes or expectations for that case? Considering the Supreme Court that we have, how hopeful are you that anything they challenge wouldn't just be upheld by the Supreme Court anyway?
Well, here's the thing, John. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of state legislatures, this is the progeny of Shelby versus Holder. And I can't believe it's been like 15 years since Shelby. This is Shelby versus Holder was a Supreme Court case, or the Supreme Court case during the Obama administration, that essentially set the stage to gut the Voting Rights Act and set the stage for all of these pieces of legislation to actually exist. Now, when that decision was written, Justice Roberts essentially said that the restrictions that were created by the Voting Rights Act weren't longer any necessary, because the vestiges of discrimination that existed in America that created the need for that no longer existed. I think what we are seeing now certainly speaks differently to that. And so if he's consistent, which the court is supposed to do, and he re-examines his logic there and sees what we're seeing across the country, perhaps he may look at, the entire court for that matter, may re-examine it in a way that says, you know what, maybe we jumped the gun on this whole post-racial idea, and it's time to sort of allow for us to revisit the Voting Rights Act, but specifically just strike down this Georgia law as being unconstitutional. And what that does is it blows the door open for a number of other challenges in state houses across the country. That may or may not happen. What I will say, because sometimes the court wants to prove itself right. What I will say about that is that the Supreme Court is not last because it's right. It's right because it's last.
Yeah. That potential future you sketched out sounds good. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Yeah, and it's crazy. It's been 15 years, huh? Yeah. Well, the Supreme Court's going to get involved in some other ways as well. We have this case of Brnovich versus the Democratic National Committee that they could potentially rule on, I suppose, any day by the end of the session. Deals with two different issues. First, Arizona's out of precinct policy, which discards ballots cast outside of the voter's designated precinct. Does it violate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act? The other part is, does Arizona's ballot collection law, which forbids anyone other than the voter, him or herself, from handling a completed early ballot, violate the same section of the VRA or the 15th Amendment? According to SCOTUS blog, during oral arguments back in March, it seemed like a majority of the justices were ready to uphold both of those provisions. So if anyone else helped you with your ballot, it could be discarded. If you happened to be in the wrong precinct, even though you're totally allowed to vote, no one questions that, no one believes it was tampered with, anything. It's just, oops, you got confused by this really confusing system, so we're gonna discard your ballot. And I think you can guess what sort of class of people are more likely to be hit by that than others. So apparently, Charles, the SCOTUS is willing to. It's looking like they're willing to uphold both of those. Is that your guess, and how significant would that be? Does that make you think differently potentially about the Georgia situation we were just talking about?
It does, and I find it to be troubling. I mean, I think that ultimately, I'm not entirely convinced that they are going to hold it up. If I had to look at the composition of the court, I'm not as confident as I would like to be, but I'm not immediately deterred. This court, surprisingly enough, has proven itself slightly more moderate than I expected. It's stacked with conservatives, but ultimately a lot of the decisions that have come out have not been as staunchly conservative as I would have expected given their makeup. That leaves me with a scintilla of hope, John. It's not necessarily like this huge ray of light that I'm expecting to see, but what could happen is a decision that doesn't necessarily talk as tough as conservatives that might like, and then ultimately muddies the waters for lawyers because it may provide room on both sides for further argument. That being said, because they may see an issue that is right or on the horizon, but punt on it because it's not the issue that was squarely put before the court. That being said, in terms of the implications that it could have on the Georgia case, it could be a very serious hurdle, or a sort of I'll say message, or sort of reading the tea leaves, if you will, around how they intend to approach the Georgia case in terms of their rationale and what they're looking for. Nevertheless, what I will also comment on is that this entire cloud of resistance to further engagement of the civic process on behalf of voters has really grown and been fertilized by a huge misinformation campaign. And I think it goes without saying, a lot of people may not, may take this for granted, but I do have to point out to the viewers that a lot of what is happening from the court of public opinion, switching gears for that matter, is the result of people not actually understanding that while these laws may seem facially neutral, and while it may seem like a good thing to protect the integrity of democracy, you are ultimately trying to, with these laws, solve for a problem that does not actually exist. And I think that the misinformation that has been put out and promulgated by so many different people on so many different levels, media included at some point, has created the idea that there is such an urgent need to stop so many people from cheating and winning and taking elections and all this other crap that hasn't actually happened. But people don't understand that. And so even in conservative districts, if they're not well informed or they haven't bothered to get media from and information from a variety of sources, they legitimately think Black and brown people are out here stuffing ballot boxes with names of dead people and stealing elections.
Yeah.
And so this legislation, like, this is the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, no one or very few people are talking about the fact that this widespread notion of voter fraud is a farce, and it's based on nothing more than a bunch of lies. And I think reframing that narrative would go a very long way in getting people to understand how, not only how unnecessary these laws are, but then when you go and take a step further and you think about who's pushing these laws, because those people who are pushing these laws are very much so informed that these aren't real problems. Then the question becomes, well, then if they're not trying to solve that, what are they trying to do?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. There's a couple of different ways that you can potentially win elections, a couple of different ways you can potentially get into power. They're choosing one rather than the other, I think. And you know what? Let's make that very clear. This last little bit of extra context I'm gonna throw out there is sort of it's a bit of here's the timeline, basically. We have the For the People Act, which would do a lot of things. One of the things it would do is to stop partisan gerrymandering. You would have to set up some sort of independent commission, not established in DC. All of it would be state level. Some of them would maintain the same independent commissions that they already have. So don't listen to, who was it, Graham? Yeah, Lindsey Graham. So here's the issue. In August, state lawmakers will begin the once per decade process of redrawing US House and other state legislative districts. Procedure Republicans are poised to use to wipe out Democrats' majority in the US House. The For the People Act would curb excessive manipulation of district lines for partisan gain. And if it isn't in place by August, Republicans would be free to freely gerrymander districts. Now, how much should this concern someone? Well, I apologize, I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but there was an analysis done of prospective gerrymandering that could be done this August that showed that fairly easily, without the Republicans having to become any more popular, do any better in the polls, simply through the gerrymandering, they could take control of the House. It's same exact situation from last November. They don't have to pitch any new policy or anything like that. They don't have to make any appeals. If they just maintain the level of support they had in the last election, which did not let them take control of the House and lost them the White House and lost them the Senate, they could take over the House just based off of that. And so that's what's lurking in just a couple of months. But right now, it's President Biden might bring it up on his trip across the US. He might say something.
You know,
and I would. So what's up?
I think I'm sorry. I appreciate your context, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, it's okay.
It brought me, what you were just talking about brought me back to one of the earlier moments on the campaign that I recall where Joe Biden was actually, this is pre-South Carolina, where Joe Biden was actually floundering in the polls. And I remember him talking to the press corps and basically saying that he was the candidate, he was the guy who had enough relationships, enough pull to basically get majority in the House and the Senate. I remember him saying this, and I was like, you know what? That's actually a strong selling point. Why isn't he playing this up more? Why isn't this more a part of his appeal, at least in terms of how he is positioning himself in this conversation? That doesn't make sense. I wasn't, it just bothered me. And as you sort of contextualize or further contextualize the moment that we're in now, I am thinking about the very same thing. This is something that you should be shouting from the rooftops, because for all of the sort of people who align themselves with the Democratic Party, for anyone who considers themselves to be a progressive or a liberal or what have you, one of the things that we are watching and looking at is this notion of having a majority in both houses. And it's like, so what are you gonna do with that? And if you're talking about a situation where you could potentially lose that because of this filibuster and what's going on, so on and so forth, it just adds such rich and important context to voters who are paying attention that it almost serves to make the case for you so that you don't have to necessarily go as hard. I mean, you should, but you don't necessarily have to go as hard, because now you're talking to people about things that they can relate to and that matter to them. And it just, the life of me, I can't understand why he has this sort of, as it was said earlier, check the box mentality. Like, who, let's be honest here. Who are you trying to save face in front of? Who are you worried about offending?
I don't know. Mitch McConnell?
I can't understand. Like, who is it that you are trying to play nice with in the sandbox? You're the president of the United States, my guy. Like, figure it out. So, and again, I just don't, for all the sensibilities that are supposedly involved in politics and all the civility that is necessary in order to make Washington function somewhat, I still can't understand why being in that space, you're not, for something that is a hallmark of your first term in office and will have very serious implications on A, whoever does run for president 3 years from now, and B, whether that person actually is going to be able to win, and then C, what kind of chambers of Congress you're handing over to them. I don't understand why you wouldn't make this a central part of your narrative.
Yeah, I think that you're right. He wanted to be president, and he's gonna be president for like a couple more months. Will he use it? Stay tuned. Anyway, okay, we are gonna take our first break. When we come back, the heat wave is devastating the West Coast right now. We're gonna give you details on that and a bit of a look ahead to what might be coming to the East Coast. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna read some of your comments, respond to them after this. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, let's see what's going on out there in the audience. Thomas from Denmark in the member comment section said Biden is shocked that this could happen, so obviously hasn't prepared for it. Yeah, I don't know. If he prepared for the obvious expected automatic filibuster on literally any piece of legislation they put forward, that's really sad, pretty sad. Anyway, let's see. Emily Smith over in the YouTube members area just became a member at tier 1. Thank you so much for that. Oh, that reminds me. I did want to make sure I mentioned this in the pre-show. I don't know if Allegra is watching right now, but Allegra sent an awesome care package to the studio, a lunchbox for TJ Lunchbox, filled with a whole bunch of fun stuff. So Allegra, thank you very much for that. Allegra also sent in a letter with some questions. I'm gonna try to save those for the next live Q&A and answer them there. So thank you to Allegra. Sometimes it takes forever for us to get the packages that people send in, but one of them actually came. So thank you for that. Okay, in the super chats, Gilbert Wilcox says remaining workforce after Black Death saw wage increase. Same for those returning to work after end of lockdown during COVID. Yeah, I doubt it's as strong of an effect just because the severity of loss of life is probably different. But I think in this case, it's partially a lot of people died, and it's partially people got a taste of a different life. They were finally freed up in some ways from a little bit of the endless grind of American capitalism, whether because the government actually supported them for a little bit and they didn't have to just put their head down and grind day after day, or they didn't have to go into work. They still continued working, but they did it from home and they realized, oh wait, there can be some sort of different balance to my life and my work. And not everybody comes out of that the exact same way. I personally am glad to be back in the studio. I had more than enough of shooting at home, but I think some people are gonna want that. So I think that we don't necessarily know exactly what all the reverberations are gonna be in workplaces, the expectations of workers and all that, but it's probably gonna be pretty significant going forward. Okay, Franklin Sharpslicer sent in a poem saying, first weapon to come out is the blame thrower, there's no doubt. Please your majesty, we kissed your hiney, then your ring, says Mitch Barr and Margarine Glean. 'Twas them, not us, so please no spanks for us, Jesus. So I think Franklin there is responding to in the pre-show. We talked about Donald Trump attacking pretty wildly both Mitch McConnell and William Barr for losing him the presidential election. It was apparently both of them or one of them, depends on who bothered him the most recently, but it definitely wasn't him. Anyway, Sean Umpleby says top 2 worst politicians, Biden is disappointing. Sean did not say who the other of the top 2 was, but Biden, look, you gotta give Biden credit. He became president, he did that. But in terms of actually getting something done, there's the skill of being a politician in staying in office and then actually delivering, and he is obviously better at the first than the second. Okay, let's see. Al M says, why does voting matter if your congressman who you voted for has no say if Biden bombs Syria and kills innocent civilians, in this case a child 2 days ago? Well, in theory, the Congress people do. I mean, there was an invocation of the War Powers Act back under President Trump. Something like that could happen. I would love to see more Democrats be willing to question their own president the way they questioned the last. There are some who are doing that. Bernie Sanders is doing that, Ro Khanna and a few others. Let's put pressure on them, see if we can build those numbers and get them to do the same thing with Biden. Now that said, we got more news. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, everybody, let's jump back into it. The predicted heat wave is now several days in, and it's bad all over the place, all over America. But the Pacific Northwest in particular has had it rough, and it's had it rough for a couple of different reasons. It's really an intersection of weather and climate, both of those things. And I know it's gonna be hard for the media, especially the right-wing media, to understand those two different things. We're gonna try to jump in a little bit. So first of all, it's a highly unusual weathered pattern that's currently in place over the Pacific Northwest. There's a record strong high pressure area known as a heat dome sitting over Washington State and British Columbia. This heat dome is yielding temperature departures from an average of between 25 to 50 degrees. So what that means is in any given spot, it might be 25 to 50 degrees hotter than it would otherwise be. And you can see that visualized in this heat map, which looks like the end of the world because it might be, not necessarily today, but this is what it's like now. You know, we're always like, oh my God, 2050 is gonna be rough. 2075, Jesus, 2100, what's it gonna be like? What's Wednesday gonna be like, honestly? So yeah, you can see, let's bring up the heat map again. Like I can see a little bit of 35 above what it's supposed to be, a little bit of 36 above what it's supposed to be. Now, what does that look like for major cities where tons of people live? Well, Seattle surpassed its record, which was set on Sunday, by 4 degrees when it hit 108 degrees on Monday. A different report said 111 degrees in Seattle. Portland hit its 3rd consecutive record day, an all-time high of 116 degrees. And the Canadian town of Lahren, I apologize, Canada, don't hate me, set a new national record for the 2nd straight day when it hit 118.2 degrees. And so simultaneously, I believe, based on what I read, the highest land temperature recorded in Canada. And as an example, in, I think it's Seattle's airport, it was 110 degrees. Normally, the expected high there would be 73 degrees. I cannot stress how big of a difference there is between 73 degrees and 111 degrees. We're gonna show you the difference in terms of infrastructure, because this is infrastructure week after all. But first, Charles, what do you think about this heat dome? It's really something.
I think conservatives have missed the boat, and let me explain why. This was the perfect opportunity to break out the Biden is sending America to hell in a handbasket. So this was the week that they were able to actually say, you see, the end is near, we're burning up because of Biden, and this is God's. I mean, they have no problem invoking God to promote everything from slavery to segregation to anti-gay marriage and everything else. Why stop now? Just like this was, that's what I think. I think it's hot as hell. And I think that people would probably, just even that, like you went for Make America Great. So why wouldn't they go for it's hot as hell, vote Republican? Like, I just don't understand how they missed the boat on this as a perfect slogan and marketing opportunity in order to sort of, show that America is literally going to hell in a handbasket, or at least it feels.
I think Newsmax said something about it's hot as Hades. So they're not willing to go to the biblical hell yet, but they're getting into mythology.
Well, Greek mythology, which is at least somewhere on the progressive chain.
Yeah.
All jokes.
It's like Mordor up in here.
Right.
Then maybe they'll do that.
All jokes aside, I think that for people who are just super resistant to science and fact, you can't ignore like what we're dealing with. And this is not just regular hot. It's not regular heat. I want to say Seattle apparently had never had back-to-back 100+ degree days ever. And now they've had 3 in a row. You have to sort of look at climate and what that means. And I mean, granted, I get it. If you're a Republican from a state like Texas, Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, you're used to sort of this heat, and you're like, what's the big deal? But properly contextualized, these places are not supposed to get this hot. And you can't just say, oh, it's the weather. We can't do anything about the weather, because as you said, yes, it is the weather, and that is part of it. But it's also climate. Like We are not supposed to get this hot. And the fact that we have progressively gotten going further and further and further in this space should prompt us to ask the question, all right, is there something we can do about this to potentially alleviate that? Or are we just going to, burn ourselves out quite literally with the way that we continue to live our lives? My prediction, John, is that it's not gonna get real for people until power grids start failing. I think.
Well, we've had a bit of it.
Yeah, I think the more and more power grids start failing and people don't have the ability to go to a cooling center or to remain in their house and remain cool, then people are gonna be like, wait a minute, what in the F is going on around here? Like that's gonna be.
Yeah, maybe, and we might be experiencing that. I mean, Texas is still gonna have a tough period. There's sections of California here, down in Southern California, that might have trouble with that coming up. It's also possible that it could happen up in the Pacific Northwest because, as thankfully a lot of people in the chat have been noting, including RC Tycoon. The thing about it being way hotter in areas where it's never that hot is the infrastructure is not set up for that heat, and that can come in many different forms. One of which is you don't tend to have AC in areas where you don't really need AC, and if you do, it's not going to be evenly distributed. Like working class, poor people are not going to have AC to the same degree as the wealthy. And so when a heat wave like this strikes something like Portland and Seattle, it doesn't strike everybody equally. And we're sort of joking around in the same way that I had to joke, month after month with the pandemic, because the alternative is just to cry on air, and we're not supposed to do that. It's in my contract. But this is very serious. People die from heat waves like everywhere. It happens all the time. It's only going to get worse and worse. People will die as a result of this, and it's going to hit poorer people more.
Really quickly, John, to your point, I didn't know this, but heat-related illnesses are the number one the number one weather-related cause of death in America. I did not know. Like, not hypothermia, not like it's heat cause or heat-related illnesses, heat stroke, and all kinds of other things. So when you tell and you say to viewers, people will die, you're not fear mongering, nor are you making this up. It's an actual thing. Like it's a real thing.
It is. Bit of a fact check there. I think it was Jennifer Brown in the YouTube chat said that Hades is mythologically supposed to be quite cold. Tell it to Newsmax. They don't do their reading. That's the problem. Anyway, but in terms of infrastructure, it's not just that, like, for instance, they don't have places for people to cool down, and the power grid might not be set for AC to be used in the places that do. It's also this in Portland. The streetcar had to go down because their power cables melted, because they're not supposed to be in heat like that. Like generators and stuff like that. Everything is set up for a particular range of temperatures, including roads. So State Route 544 had to be closed because the asphalt roadway buckled and broke. And you can find this in multiple different areas of the Pacific Northwest. Photos are going around. Their streets are literally failing because of it. And God help you if you have to walk on some of these streets, by the way. And so this is a disaster. It's not 75 years in the future. It's happening right now. It is part weather, yes, but it's part climate. And by the way, those two things aren't independent either, because high pressure areas like this heat dome are not going to happen the same rate in a world that's 2 degrees Celsius cooler as it is right now. So that is also being affected by this. And thankfully, I think the media is doing a little bit better of a job. I've read that something like 27% of the major news networks coverage segments about the heat wave mention climate. That's way higher than we've had in the past. It is still a small minority of the total amount of coverage, so just bear that in mind. Now, I want to very briefly go into one more climate related story just because I found it fascinating. It's a bit more of an evergreen thing, but let's jump into this. Long term, what is going to happen as the climate continues to get hotter, as the ocean level continues to rise? Well, some places are going to be hit earlier than others. And so the Florida Keys, that's an area that is going to be devastated, and it's not that long in the future. And they're starting to prepare for it, but their preparations seem still to be a little bit out of scale with what's going to happen. So Monroe County officials had this 7-hour meeting back on Monday about this. They agreed to push ahead with a plan to elevate streets throughout the Keys to keep them from perpetual flooding. but they admitted that they don't have the money to do so. They need something like $1.8 billion over the next 25 years to raise 150 miles of the roads in the Keys, to add more drains and pump stations and vegetation to absorb the seawater. The thing is, their county budget's not going to be able to cover the cost of all of those. And if they have to do a mass buyout of homes, which is definitely going to happen, these places are not going to be habitable. They're not going to be able to do that either. So they wanted Florida state lawmakers to levy a new tax to pay for it, but Florida state said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not interested. And so right now, if the funding isn't found, there are going to be a lot of roads that you won't be able to traverse. There's going to be homes you won't be able to live in. And all of this, by the way, this is just a brief little fix. They're going to elevate those roads. They're going to move some people, but that does not solve the problem. They will later have to abandon those roads even if they elevate them. The people they move, if they don't move them far enough, are going to have to move again, and more homes will need to be cleared away. So you're starting to see areas in Florida, the lower lying areas, kind of starting to acknowledge what's happening, but not really understanding the scope of this thing. And you have no assist coming from the Florida state government because they don't even want to pretend that they get how bad this is going to be. Charlie, anything about this?
I think that these things are not as relevant to folks until they start to happen. The sense of urgency is what is going to dictate people's willingness to action. And I think in part, there are a few things that have really fueled the resistance to the climate change movement in terms of people not wanting to acknowledge the severity. Number one, misinformation and ignorance, right? Like people are just not informed at the level and to the degree that they need to be in order to make decisions around it. And number two, people are really like, so when's this gonna happen? I don't know if I'll be around then. I'll be all right. And so when it comes to, when it comes to like making decisions that are uncomfortable or difficult in the present to stave off what could or might happen with your mumbo jumbo wizardry science in the future, people will tend to sort of err on, well, we want to spend that money on this now because it's something that we can reach and touch, as opposed to something that may be 30, 40, 50 years off, even though now we're at 30, 40, 50 years from when people began to see this. And then the other thing is like, I say this in jest kinda, but it's actually a real thing. On a certain level, like entertainment has skewed our idea around how these happen. Like how many sort of weather climate movies have we seen where Morgan Freeman is the president and then like New York City freezes over? I know that was specifically one movie, but The Perfect Storm, The Day After Tomorrow, There Is No Tomorrow. I don't know.
2012.
Yeah, I don't know these titles, but I think people sort of process even a small part of them, even though it's a movie, like if it's not a cataclysmic event, by the way, I don't know how much more cataclysmic you want than a heat dome that is literally buckling streets in the Pacific Northwest. But putting that aside, if it's not like a cataclysmic event, I think people sort of undervalue the urgency of it and the severity of it because they feel like we can put it off. But we're at the point that you cannot keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it might not be as sexy as the movies, and it doesn't work exactly like you think. Like we talk about sea level rise, and I think people think it's like, oh, the street's here, the river's here, you're good, or the ocean's here, and then it goes up, and then oh no, it's getting close. Oh, now it's not habitable. That's not how it works at all. It's the storm hits you worse, and next year it hits you even worse, and then worse the next year, and it devastates you the next year. And that is long before it literally is above the street. And that is already happening. So Florida, like get it together. The localities, the state, they're gonna need federal aid. This is a massive effort. We're going to need to evacuate millions and millions of people. But so far, people are just sticking their head in the rapidly moistening ground and pretending that none of this is happening. Okay, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, a lot more to get to. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, let's see. In the members comment section, thank you to all of the members. We appreciate you. 1020 Carey says, I keep thinking about the power grid collapsing as the heat wave continues. Yeah, that's going to become increasingly common in a lot of parts of the country. Raphael, I saw like in the Pacific Northwest, they were like releasing some of the holds on how many people could be in places like pools and movie theaters, which I get it. You have to help these people, but then it's also still a pandemic. Yeah. Let's see, Raphael K says the roads are buckling in Seattle because the asphalt cannot handle the heat. It's causing obstructions on the freeway. Yeah, it's gonna cause problems on there. It could cause problems to the bridges. It's gonna cause problems to the power lines at exactly the time where we don't need power lines having problems. In reference to one of the things we talked about early on, 18-Wheel Dragon says, LMAO, rich white people saying pointing out our racism is racist. Yeah, the thing about the pointing out the IDs. Okay, Bernie the Kiwi Dragon says, in reference to the title, Trump is like Teflon and nothing sticks, people say. But what I have seen of Teflon is that overheating damages it, then everything sticks. We'll see if he can take the heat in the end. We'll see. We'll see. I've said ad nauseum how little expectation I have of any lasting significant criminal consequences, and wait until we get to the actual things that they're potentially facing. We'll see about that. You never know, but this is America. He's a former politician. He's well connected. He's rich. He's white. He's got multiple layers of defense there. CG High says, we're on fire in Northern California. Firefighters are so burdened. Shout out to everyone trying to protect us. Agreed. Like we're dealing with the heat right now, but the fires are coming and they are going to be rough. It's been a couple of bad years. It is only going to get worse. I'm sure many people saw the viral photo of that firefighter that's going around. It's gonna be a rough year for them. Jeffrey Ritchie says, hey Dragon Daddy, what's your shirt size? It's large. You don't say why, but thank you, it's large. Elizabeth DeLelio says, I lost one of my chickens to the heat. I follow a Pack NW chicken page on Facebook. Some people lost their whole flocks. It was truly epic in the worst way. Yeah, like if it's killing the chickens, people need to pay attention. And I don't know, I live on the West Coast. So we have people who watch from all over the country, all over the world. Have you seen coverage of this? How seriously are people taking it in other parts of the country and other parts of the world? I know, by the way, other parts of the world are having their own issues. There's a place in, I believe it was in Pakistan. The way they're describing it is too hot for the human body to handle. Like the actual biological mechanisms that we cool ourselves off with are totally overwhelmed by the heat. I think it's Jacobabad, I believe is the area. Anyway, look it up. Sean Umpaby says that heat map looks like a map of Middle Earth. We're literally living in an apocalyptic movie. We need the Green New Deal. I hope it's not too late. Well, it depends on what you mean by too late. It's certainly too late to avoid a lot of the issues that we're already seeing. We'll see. Non-Human Humanist says the entire world uses Celsius degrees. Example, 109 degrees Fahrenheit would be 43 Celsius. US, your numbers are the biggest. You are still unimpressed. Yes, I understand that. I can kind of do the conversion. I don't get too thrown off by that. Okay, let's see. Obi-Wan Kenobi gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Very nice of you, thank you. The Artsy Fartsy Dragon gifted 5 as well. Melissa the Defender Dragon gifted 5. Woo, what is going on out there on Twitch? Holy Beer Dragon gifted 5. Z Huddle gifted 1. Thank you to all of you for helping to grow our community. That's so inviting to people who are visiting our show for the first time. Thank you so much. And with that, a little bit more news for this first hour. See you in a sec. Okay, let's jump into something weird. We're gonna start off with this video.
God's about to bring the whole house down, ladies and gentlemen. These bunch of sex trafficking mongrels are about to be exposed. These bunch of pedophiles in Hollywood are gonna be exposed for who they are. I don't care what you think about fraudulent Sleepy Joe. He's a sex trafficking, demon-possessed mongrel. He's of the left. He ain't no better than the Pope and Oprah Winfrey and Tom Hanks and the rest of that wicked crowd. God is gonna bring the whole house down.
I don't like the words he's using, but I'm excited about it. He's really excited, and he's like, it's Oprah and it's the Pope, and they're comparable in some way. And Tom Hanks, you know about the Tom Hanks. Wait, what was all that about? So there's a little bit of Biden's fraudulent. There's a little bit of sex trafficking and demons. To Charles' point earlier, you could really tie in. It's really hot. Maybe it's because of that demon president we've got. But anyway, what you're seeing there is right-wing pastor Greg Locke. But what he had to say had very little to do explicitly with religion, with any religion. Almost all of what he had to say there was effectively QAnon stuff. That's what it was. But you'll note he didn't mention QAnon. He didn't mention Q in any way. So what I want to talk about here is what a lot of people are saying is the next phase of QAnon, which is the QAnon without the Q and without the anon. But all of the mythology remains. They're still, see, we have the Q, but they don't. Note that. It's still they're trafficking children. It's still like their weird obsession with people like Tom Hanks. That's really what sells it. Why Tom Hanks? Well, because QAnon thinks that Tom Hanks is trafficking children. There's still going to be retribution. Now, Greg Locke flavors it as God is going to come down on all these people. Traditional old recipe QAnon was somehow the military is going to come in and kill all the Democrats. But it's all about all of the elites that you don't like are trafficking children, they're raping children, and at some point there's gonna be some sort of retribution and they're all gonna die. But we're not saying Q anymore, so you can't ban us from YouTube, I guess. Charles, what do you think about this?
I think it's too hot and it's melting people's brains. This is very, very beyond sad. It's very disconcerting. Like it's almost like Bizarro RPG, like people playing like a role play game and to step out of that Bizarro Land universe. I think that there are people who simply cannot accept and embrace, not even embrace, because that's probably asking far too much, but they cannot accept the reality of America as it is. They cannot accept that the reality of what it is that they thought that they knew, believed in, or wanted, that made them comfortable, that they grew up on, that they know that has allowed them to exist without much constraint or limit, has changed and continues to change and is being challenged in ways substantively that have not been before. And so instead of existing in that reality, it's easier for them, and I say this quite seriously, to sort of cling to these notions that explain why all of this is happening and make it something that they can continue to resist. And they've done it for so long that at this point they're so deep down the rabbit hole that to admit that they were wrong leaves them in a space of, well, if all of that was a farce, if all of that was a joke, if I believed in all of that, what does that say? What does it leave me? What is my actual reality? So I think, unfortunately, what it boils down to is that a bunch of these folks, if you looked at who was in the audience there, you didn't see much diversity.
That's true,
right? So like a bunch of folks are looking at the way that things around us are changing. They don't like it. That is a reality that they want to reject. So it's easier for them to come up with all these cockamamie stories and plot twists and lines of reason that don't make any sense or go anywhere or have any actual support as an alternative to the current reality because they're just not comfortable. And I think it's actually relatively sad that someone would be that uncomfortable with reality that they would make up one to live in. But
yeah, and look, I think that that's very common. The thing that bothers me is that there's so many people that are ready to pounce on those. The millions and millions of Americans that have reached this level of psychological and emotional fragility that they cannot accept any more bad news, basically. Like it's avoidance of cognitive dissonance, basically. Like I believe that this was going to happen. This didn't happen. That hurts. No, wait, it did happen somehow. That's easier somehow. And the need for things to be simplified. That I can't oppose Joe Biden because he's going to raise the corporate tax rate theoretically by a couple of percentage points, which he isn't going to do. But let's say that's a reason to oppose him. That's not good enough. I have to oppose him because he is the literal devil. That's easier. It doesn't require as much thought and all of that. It has to be simple and it has to be what I want. And that's what you have with QAnon. That's what you have now. And this is sort of the Christian version of it. There's other versions too. Now, I want to play a little bit more of his video, and then we've got a poll for you because I'm curious what people think about this. So here's a bit more of Greg Locke.
Do you really think it's that much of an epidemic? Do you honestly believe, we're going to get some more crazy. Do you honestly believe, Pastor Locke, that the military uncovered tunnels beneath the Capitol building and beneath the White House and in the Five-Fingered Lakes? Do you really believe that they found kids? Yeah, both live ones and dead ones. And if you disagree with that, and if you try to discount that, and if you try to cover that, and if you try to keep that on the DL, you're just as complicit as Hunter Biden and the rest of them bunch of crack-smoking perverts.
Okay, so if you're watching that and you're terrified about the sex trafficking, if anyone tries to save you from this misinformation, they're as bad as the perverts. So this is a grifter. That's all he's doing is he's grifting, and he's trying to inoculate the people listening to him, not against COVID. That's something that the devil is trying to do to you. Inoculate them against any appeal to reason or sanity. Those are as bad as the pedophiles. And it's sad and it's evolving. We're gonna occasionally check in because you need to know that it's out there. Just because you don't see Q in people's social media doesn't mean this thing is dead. Now, really fast, we do have a poll. Let's bring that up. I wanna see what y'all think about this. So who is most likely to have kids in their basement? Because I wanna give him a real chance at his theory. Is it Joe Biden? Is it Tom Hanks? Is it Oprah Winfrey? Or is it Brett Ehrlich? You can go to tyt.com/polls and let us know.
I didn't make the list. Are we?
That's true. No, they don't mind that. They're okay with Matt Gaetz. They don't mind Jeffrey Epstein and his connections to Republican politicians. They don't care about the actual stuff. But I just, because he didn't put enough names for us to fill the list. So we had to fill it in, and we just put the things that seemed most reasonable. So tyt.com/polls. We're gonna do the results on the show tomorrow. Any final thoughts? We got like 20 seconds more, Charles, on QAnon's evolution.
I just think that this is really a dividing line between the haves and have not. And what I mean by the haves, I mean it has a modicum of sense and those who do not. Because at the end of the day, everyone on the QAnon piece is consistently talking about what is about to happen. It is about to be blown off of this. Everything's about to be revealed. And we've been waiting for this big reveal. And guess what, QAnon? It's just not coming. At what point
That's true.
Decide to back it up?
Yeah, maybe someday, but we're not there yet, unfortunately. Okay, we have got a lot more news to get to. Thank you to our linear audience for Twitch and YouTube. We've got some more coming up after this. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here, whether you're on the members app, YouTube or Twitch. We got some more news coming up for you in just a little bit, but I also want to let you know what else is coming up. And not much longer, about 28 minutes or so, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie is going to be streaming at youtube.com/indisputable_TYT. And today you can expect Adrienne Lawrence as co-host, Bryson Gray, a conservative, is going to pop in, probably debate the good doctor, and Noorani is going to be a guest, so it should be a lot of fun. Definitely look forward to that coming up after the show. Wanted to remind you that we're in a brief period of trying to encourage people who might not have currently, not have yet become members for TYT. I talk about YouTube membership and all that. Here I'm talking about actual TYT membership, which you can find out about at tyt.com/change. We're in a period where we are trying to pressure the Biden administration. We are trying to encourage great progressives to run for office. We're gonna be spotlighting literally dozens and dozens of them over the course of the next year. And we want you to be a part of this change. You can go to tyt.com/change to find out more there. Also, we are trying to encourage you to expose yourself to amazing insight and analysis at the Twitter account of Charles Coleman Jr. Charles, where can they find that?
That's CF Coleman Jr. on Twitter. Just type it in and hit that follow button. We're at about like 80 right now. It's right on the screen, CF Coleman Jr. I wanna see if we can get to 100 by the end of the show, so let's make it happen.
They said it couldn't be done. Sophie, the producer, said it couldn't be done, but I think it could be done. So you can head over there and take a look. That said, let me read just a couple of quick super chats and we're gonna jump into our next story. Lazy Peon, the Stone Eagle Dragon says, fight the empire, go metric. John, how about adding Celsius and meters to the graphics? Show some love to us scary foreigners. If there was an easy way to do that, I would. Seems tough, sorry. But I love you though. Chris Kidda says, watched on a delay at work. I've spent my whole life in the Pacific Northwest. The heat has been bad enough for people with homes, unimaginably worse for the homeless. God forbid this continue and people aren't protected from evictions. Yes, that's what we needed on top of like the pandemic, evictions, economic collapse, and also now the heat. Whew, okay, Ghost Dog just extended their Twitch subscription. Thank you for that. DD Reggae did for 7 months. Velvet Goldmine for 7 months as well. Thank you to both of you, the 7-month club. Mother effing Woman Dragon gifted tier 1 sub. Very nice of you. Thank you so much for that. And let's see, over at #TDR Live on Twitter, Canna Dragon says, John and Charles, the perfect combination of insight for today's show. Loving listening to you two, absolutely brilliant. Thank you for everything y'all do. I can't ever thank you enough. Nope, you just did. That was very nice of you. Thank you so much. And with that, let's jump back into the news if I can find where I was. Okay. We've been waiting to find out if criminal charges will be announced against the Trump organization or some member of its board, potentially the executive Alan Weisselberg, if not Donald Trump himself. It could be coming any day now. It could be coming this week. And the Trump org is launching some sort of last-ditch effort to avoid that, with the attorneys for the Trump organization meeting with prosecutors in New York earlier this week, just yesterday, to argue that former President Donald Trump's company should not be criminally charged over its business dealings. The meeting lasted less than an hour over a video call, shorter than any video meeting I've had during the pandemic. It came after prosecutors warned that the Trump organization, that they were considering indicting the company and its long-serving chief financial officer. So in just a minute, we're gonna get into what the potential charges are. And I would say that in general, I would describe them as far more limited than I was probably expecting, I guess. But we'll see. In advance, though, we have to give Donald Trump a chance to respond to what's happening there, as my Skype feed is going crazy and you can see it reflected in the background. I don't know what that is. Anyway, here is what Donald Trump had to say. I don't think I'm gonna read this entire thing because it's a lot, but after hundreds of subpoenas, over 3 million pages of documents, 4 years of searching, dozens and dozens of interviews, and millions of dollars of taxpayer funds wasted, they continue to be in search of a crime and will do anything to frighten people into making up the stories or lies that they want, but they have been totally unable to get. They will do anything to stop the MAGA movement and me even if it involves prosecutorial misconduct and harassment of a political opponent, which they are using at levels rarely seen before. They leak, they lie, and they campaign based on information that has already been gone through in other of the many investigations I have put up with. That was sort of a mess. But the idea there is that the prosecutors don't have anything, and if they do have anything, it is just based on lies that were told to them by executives that have been intimidated into lying. And so I think that that's designed to scare Weisselberg specifically because although we're not gonna go into all the details, there's concerns about perks that were provided to Weisselberg and other executives, private school tuition and stuff like that, that might not have been logged correctly in company ledgers, and that might not be so much about trying to get Weisselberg, but to flip him. Now, none of that says that what they're doing is actually wrong or that there's a lie or anything like that, Charles. But what do you think about this? It seems like they're worried. Do they have anything to worry about?
This is actually more complicated than people would think. At the end of the day, what we are watching with prosecutors and they're sort of pressuring right now is exactly right. They are putting a lot of stock in Weisselberg and being able to flip him. And they're hoping not only can they flip him, and at the end of it, and it's very important to understand that we're not talking about flipping him for the purposes of these cases, i.e. the benefits that may have been afforded to actual employees and trying to skirt the tax laws. This is not Al Capone. This is not how we're going to get Donald Trump. That's not what we're talking about. What they're actually hoping is that there is a bigger case afoot somewhere, somehow, and that he's going to give them some inkling of information that is going to actually allow them to do something much bigger than what we're talking about right now. And I think the other side to it is, in fairness, putting on my hat as an attorney, for people to be criminally prosecuted for these sorts of things is relatively rare. It is somewhat unusual because this is usually dealt with in the civil realm. So obviously there are political motivations that are fueling how this is being approached. But what that says, and this is why I said this is more complicated, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be prosecuted on a criminal scale. I'm saying that it is unusual. And that's why it gets more complicated. For years, we have allowed sort of people who have been in that haves versus the have-not section to get away with things that were illegal and deal with them in the civil realm. Now that we're in a situation where we actually want to punish someone or use it in terms of actually making it criminal, you have the hurdle of being able to sort of answer the question of, well, that's been the common practice over here. And when that's been the case, we've dealt with it in this way. Why are you trying to change the rules now? And I think that is why it gets more complicated than people actually realize. And I think, Cy Vance and Letitia James, they have to really think about some of the sort of rhetoric that they put out early on in the election, because this is a big part of what it is that they sort of ran on. They were looking at the public basically saying like, listen, we're gonna get him. We are gonna get him. And I don't know if this is it, John. And to be honest with you, I don't think that it's it. I don't know if Weisselberg will flip. I don't know if he has anything that's super duper valuable enough that's going to actually connect Donald Trump to some criminal activity that's going to find him in handcuffs. Yeah. I think that Trump put a lot of space between himself and criminal dealings, and we have seen from Flynn to Roger Stone to the list goes on and on. He has no problem throwing people under the bus. Yeah. So I'm not certain that this is going to be sort of like the thing that lands Trump in jail, which is why I said this is not the Al Capone taxes. That's how we got him. I don't think this is it.
So and the thing is, like, what they're looking into Weisselberg for seems like very small. It's obvious. They're describing crimes, and crimes are illegal, and you should be punished. I grant that, but in the larger scale picture, it doesn't seem that big. What I think is much more interesting, and I think there's almost certainly there, and perhaps they need Weisselberg to really prove that this is happening, whether they can connect it to Donald Trump or not, has to do with the fraud. So prosecutors have looked into whether the Trump organization lied about the value of real estate holdings to lower taxes or to obtain bank loans or insurance payments on favorable terms. They're also looking into the hush money payments and all that. I consider that a separate thing. But the insurance fraud and the fraud to get loans from banks, that's been lingering out there waiting to be looked into for literally years. And it was described by, I'm blanking on Cohen. So Cohen described this in his congressional testimony that this is something they would do. They would jack up the value of these properties to get loans. Then they would claim that they were worth far less so that they wouldn't have to pay as much in taxes. There was talk of insurance fraud in response to supposed damage that was done to property from extreme weather events that didn't actually happen. And this is not Michael Cohen. Yes, so this is not like very small amounts of money. So again, I don't know that they can prove that, whether they need Weisselberg for that, or if they can connect it directly to Donald Trump. But I would be shocked if it wasn't happening at the very least, whether we ever really find out the details or not.
I think it probably is happening. I think it probably has happened. I mean, I take issue with the idea that these weather events didn't happen because climate. But
no, they happened. I just don't think they damaged the property to the extent they said it did.
But here's the thing: I think viewers have to really ask themselves, for those folks who have a bloodlust for Donald Trump and seeing him incarcerated or pay his penance for what he did to America, are you really going to be satisfied if his company is found to have been liable and or pays his fines? I mean, I think that in terms of common spaces of decency, he will forever and ever be a pariah unless he saves the Pope from a burning building and a bunch of children. He will forever and ever be persona non grata from henceforth. So there's that, right? But I almost feel like, and I'm not saying that these people should not be punished, nor am I saying that the Trump organization should not have to face penalties for wrongdoing of any sort. What I'm saying is that we have to think, is it really going to give us the satisfaction? And I hate to use that word, but I guess that's really the only thing I can think of, by seeing all of that around him crumble while he walks away free with very little consequence to his personal life. People want to see him in jail. They want to see him in a jumpsuit, wearing the shackles and the handcuffs. That's what they want to see. And this is just not gonna do it. And so I'm just kind of wondering, I'm wondering if you voted for, whether it's in Florida or New York, if you voted for an elected official and that was a significant reason why you voted for them, and that doesn't happen, does it change how you feel when it comes re-election time if they just get the corporation but not Donald Trump?
I think that your read of what people want is totally right on. I think there's a lot of people that want to see that. I on some level would love to see it because I think that he has done unimaginable things. I think a lot of presidents have probably merited that sort of treatment. I don't expect it at all though. I haven't invested any of my spirit in even the inconvenient his company lost money stuff, let alone that he's gonna be like doing bench presses in the yard. I have no expectation of that.
Oh my God.
We'll see. He would be working out. Anyway.
Oh, I paid money for that.
Yeah. Okay. But we got to move on to another topic. I want to check in with the audience. Just read a couple super chats. Moondragon had said the unhoused have no AC, but that doesn't matter. All AC is sold out here. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be roughest there on the unhoused, and we're talking about huge areas of the US. Matt E says, I live in Seattle and it's 72 degrees outside. After the past few days, it feels so cold out. Okay, that's it. That's not what I'm seeing in the news, but Matt, I'm glad that you're not experiencing horrible temperatures there. Let's see. Lamine Davis says, I don't think the power grid failing will convince conservatives. Last time it happened in Texas, they said the snow was fake. That's true. I was gonna say they were convinced that it was the fault of renewable energy, but they did say that the snow was fake. That's madness, man. People were dying and they said that. Linda M says, 1995 July Chicago heat wave killed 735 people. Temps as high as 115 degrees. Wow. Thank you for that. Asimov's Prophet, I appreciate your super chat as well. Forbesilla says he said cockamamie. I love you, Charles. That's funny. And by the way, I see that we did pass that 100 mark, so thank you to everybody. But the joke's on you, because in following Charles, you're gonna have a good time and learn stuff. So we fooled you into learning. Anyway, let's see. Okay, George says I only super chat when Mr. Coleman is here. No offense, John. Okay, that's fine. We'll have to have him on more, I guess. Nicole Smith says filibuster is minority rule. Abolish the filibuster. Listen to the people. Thank you, John, TDR and TYT. Keep it up, fam. Nicole Smith, thank you so much. Okay, with that, let's jump into, man, I feel like we're starting to cover sports news here more at TDR. We almost never do, but now it's become like a regular thing. We were talking about Gwen Berry yesterday. Now we got this. Let's do it. Okay. An NCAA association committee has decided that student athletes should be allowed to monetize their position in the form of appearances, endorsements, and social media platforms. Their final guidance on this is going to be coming probably tomorrow. But they did decide that. They said under proposed guidelines that students who do this will not face NCAA repercussions, which in the past has included things like a loss of eligibility for athletics, which is obviously incredibly significant, if they choose to profit off their names, images, or likenesses. Schools in many states are expected to set policies around matters like whether students may wear a university's logo in an advertisement. So this would be a big change. Previously, it was not okay to make money off these athletes unless you were a school. Then you could make any amount of money you want, a huge amount of money. It's expected that for most athletes, this is probably not going to generate a lot of money, but there are some stars that could end up making hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more. It's expected that this could be even more significant for women, for female athletes who are, they get big audiences as college athletes, but when they go into the professional leagues, generally the pay is not significant in comparison to male athletes. So this might help them out more. What's interesting, of course, Charles, is that this is happening after the Supreme Court said that there's effectively like an antitrust situation going on with the schools who've been profiting for so long. And so it makes me wonder if this is less about, hey, we're evolving and being understanding, and more about trying to get out in front of something more significant maybe as a result of that Supreme Court decision. What do you think?
I think that this is absolutely not about the evolution of an enlightenment of NCAA sports. I think it has everything to do with, let's see how much we can stave off what we know is inevitably coming, and that we know that we are going to have some problems in terms of keeping athletes in pocket, so to speak, both literally and figuratively, so to speak, in that way. What a lot of viewers may not know is that there has already been groundwork laid for collegiate athletes to unionize. And because of that, that is something that is ultimately going to, I think, be the next frontier of a fight for college athletics. Because the minute, like you said, they were saying that, the number of athletes who stand to make, student athletes who stand to make a significant amount of money from profiting off of their likeness and their appearances and things of that nature, is very, very small as compared to the number of student athletes that are out there. Like, I don't necessarily know that like Denny's is paying the water polo team from, I don't know, Ball State to come and sign autographs. That said, if athletes decide to unionize, now that's a whole different game changer in terms of what it can mean for the universities, what sort of demands they could put on these programs, and how they could be able to take the power back into their own hands. And so I think for right now, the NCAA is content to seeing where the tide has shifted. This is not a new conversation, but it's never had the type of momentum that it has, gained now. And so seeing how the tide has shifted, I think the NCAA has decided like, hey, let's try to get ahead of what may be some monumental losses and make it as appealing for these kids so that they don't decide to unionize and make our lives hell. Because the minute that they do, like, organized labor will be the thing that just totally changes the landscape of sports at the collegiate level. So I think it has very little, if anything at all, to do with actual evolution, good-heartedness, or doing it because it's the right thing to do. I think they would be fine to exploit this talent and this crop of essentially, a workforce that provides them with a live entertainment element to their university that otherwise would not exist but for their labor for as long as they could. And now that gravy train has come to an end.
Yeah, and it's sort of insidious too, because like, as we've said, it's probably not going to be like a very small percentage are going to be able to make significant money, but there's going to be that like maybe I could make money, which might cause some of them to not look to other ways to get sort of what they have coming to them in terms of unionization, that sort of thing. But more importantly, for those who can make significant amount of money, and apparently some have already started working on it. So there's a men's basketball player at the University of Iowa, Jordan Bahanan, who's announced plans for an apparel line that will debut on Thursday. So hitting the ground running, this thing just came out and there's already gonna be an apparel line. University of Wisconsin starting quarterback Graham Mertz posted a video with a personal logo. So for them, this probably is better than just some unionized pay, maybe for the highest percentile. And so why does that matter? Well, I would imagine that if you were gonna try to get some sort of nationwide union movement, having the highest profile athletes be a part of it would lend more, like get more eyes on it and all that. But if they strip them away with a little bit of money from endorsements and stuff like that, that might hurt the movement overall. A movement that's already gonna be difficult because let's just identify, it is a transient workforce. It lasts for a few years. That is going to make a union effort harder than some sort of entrenched thing where people have been there for literally decades. In theory, you could have maybe some of the support staff get involved or something like that, but it is a bit more transient. So I wonder to what extent this will work.
I'm gonna throw you another curveball, John. There is a growing movement among sort of top tier talent, particularly in the football and basketball arena and track and field, where they are now considering whether they are going to take their talents to historically black colleges and universities. And so because of the external racial reckoning that we've been watching in America, more and more parents, more and more student athletes, and more families are actually looking at HBCUs as viable options, despite not having the popularized athletic opportunities that might exist at a Duke in terms of television contracts and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
What I predict is going to start happening is that universities are going to start essentially doing what professional organizations do with free agencies, talking to recruits about the ways that they can make money if they go to their school, the opportunities that are there surrounding the school. Not saying that they're going to necessarily facilitate that, but saying, hey, if you come here as opposed to going to a Howard or a North Carolina A&T, look at what's available to you, look at what's around, so on and so forth. So unfortunately, I have no doubt that the big guy will find a way to turn this around in some sort of nefarious attempt to keep his hands in the pockets of these young people.
That is certainly possible. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Charles, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, where can people take a look at your work?
You can find me at Twitter, Jr. That is a great place. I'm also on Instagram, Charles Coleman Jr. You can find me on Instagram, CFC40_official. And my one verified account is on Facebook. That's Charles F. Coleman Jr. So you can follow me there. You guys are really smart. So the Facebook account and the Twitter account is probably the one you want to go to. Instagram is just like sneakers and cigars, because that's
nice.
Always a pleasure, John. Really, really enjoy.
Great to have you on.
Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you, always. And for those of you watching at home, thank you so much for joining us. Really fast, I just want to read this one from members' comment. Thomas says, the forest fires in California were caused by lasers from airplanes in space. They'll come up with something as well. Yeah, they're gonna come up with some kind of excuse. Oh God, Wayne expects that Trump would have set off a nuke to break up the heat dome. It's a good idea, it's worth trying. Anyway, yeah, Noorani is pointing out how bad the heat is for the crops and everything. Yeah, there's consequences across so many different areas. Anyway, yeah, I know we're running out of time. I love reading the comments. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Indisputable is coming up. You go to youtube.com/indisputable_TYT to tune into that. Adrienne Lawrence is gonna be the co-host, so it should be awesome. She's gonna be joining us on Thursday as well. But until next time, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and I'll see you soon.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Richard. Good to have you with me. We got a great show today. You don't want to miss my I Wish a Karen Wood segment that's coming in hot and heavy. Also, we have as a guest later in the program, President and CEO of National Immigration Forum podcast host, only in America, Ali Noorani will be with us. And breaking down news of the day, my dear sister, Adrienne Lawrence, TYT contributor, host of Overruled on Rebel HQ, attorney at law. And my bullpen guest will be Bryson Gray. Bryson Gray, this is a Bryson Gray, interesting person, Christian conservative artist, producer, and personality. That's just going to be a live one. Trust me on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, news of the day, my top story. During Saturday's US Olympic track and field trials, there's a remarkable individual who displayed significant courage. Her name is Gwen. Gwen Berry placed third in the hammer throw. That means she is strategic and strong, securing her spot to compete in Tokyo. Well, most of the attention was not connected to her performance or her athleticism, but instead connected to her independence. Well, she decided not to participate in the national anthem, which, by the way, she has the right to do so. She was suspended back in 2019 because she had the audacity to hold up a fist in protest of a local game at that time. She was suspended from this very same committee. We're going to talk about why this is insanity on top of insanity. When she took her place on the podium, the national anthem played. She turned away from the flag. Afterward, Berry told the press that her protest had been spontaneous because she did not expect them to play it at that time, according to what she was told. The person who decided to go on Fox News and talk trash about this woman, his name is Seth John. Well, Seth is a character himself. So let me first read a quote from Gwen Berry. Gwen says, "I feel like it was a setup." Berry said, laughing per the Washington Post, "I feel like they did that on purpose. And I was pissed, to be honest. I was thinking about what should I do. Eventually, I just stayed there and just swayed. I put my shirt over my head. I know they did that on purpose, but it'll be all right. I see what's up. You see, I like that." And then she came out with a tweet. Now, typically, when you have an athlete, especially at this level, with this kind of global pressure, this kind of America-dominated pressure, this kind of patriot pressure, they come back and they apologize. Well, she did not. Her tweet said, "I said what I said. I meant what I said. Stop playing with me, period. Hashtag activist athlete." Can I just say this? This is not your granddaddy's civil rights movement. That's not what this is anymore. These folks are not playing. She said what she said and she meant it. Stop playing with her. Well, she will continue to advance, but something else quite interesting. Former US soccer Paralympic team captain, remember this guy? Seth John angered people with a speech during the US Soccer Federation's annual meeting. The USSF removed John from the Players Council on Monday. He has since issued an apology for his remarks, while the USSF has issued a statement condemning his racist rhetoric. So who do you think Fox News brought on to talk trash about Gwen? The racist guy. So here it is.
Berry later responded saying, quote, "I feel like it was a setup and they did it on purpose. They had enough opportunities to play the national anthem before we got up there. It was real disrespectful." Seth John represented the US overseas on the soccer field at the 2015 Pan American Games and joins us now. Seth, what is your reaction to this?
First word that comes to mind is disgraceful. It's ridiculous for her to even state that she felt like she was set up here on the podium. That's when they played the anthem.
Now, damn it, that's caucasity. You are literally suspended, removed, excommunicated for saying racist things against black people, and you are on national television talking about a black woman not being able to express her constitutional freedom, her independence. Wow, they called you. You're the guy they called. Let me go to the quote from this nut. He said, and I quote, this is what got him in trouble. He said, and I quote, "I keep hearing how our country was founded on the backs of slaves, even though approximately only 8% of the entire population even owned slaves. Every race in the history of mankind has been enslaved by another demographic at some point." This guy said this in a very public forum. This guy said even more than that. He cited that black people killed 95% of other black people, just ridiculous statistics that are not true. They censored him for it, said he has to go, but he's the guy that Fox News decided to dig up from the damn ashes to make a comment antithetical to this dear sister who is now going to the Olympics. Let me bring Adrienne in. Adrienne, what do you see here?
Well, I see a lot of nonsense going on right now in all levels, from kind of what was going on with the IOC, with the committee in particular, and their unwillingness to maybe give her a heads up in terms of when the anthem would be played. She made abundantly clear that she was not comfortable being out there when the anthem would be played, and thus she had prepared herself for that. For it to kind of be, dropped on her at the last minute, it's problematic because the reality is that the nation that's supposed to be one nation under God representing everyone has not represented everyone. So to push it on her and to make it feel like she is being set up, that's a hell of a thing. And it's also really problematic because there is so much division in this country, due in part for the fact that Black people have been mistreated and nothing's been done to rectify that, and nothing is being done, yet the oppression continues.
Let me tell you why I believe Gwen Berry. I did some independent research, and Seth was incorrect on Fox News when he said, well, she's at the podium, they played the national anthem. Well, in the Olympic trials, they only played the national anthem twice a day. They do not play the national anthem at every podium award ceremony. They do so in the Olympic Games, but they do not do so in the Olympic trials. So when she came out and said, listen, they told me they were not going to play the national anthem until this particular time, I believe her. I think her statement is accurate, and based on the rules of the Olympic trials, they only played that national anthem twice a day. And for everyone who continues to say, what did she expect? She was on the podium. They played the national anthem. That is only reserved for the actual Olympic Games. Gwen knew what she was talking about.
Absolutely. And you know what? The thing is, earlier this year, the International Olympics Committee, the IOC, it changed the rules that allow athletes to protest at these types of domestic events, these trials, without being penalized. But the thing is, that won't necessarily be the case when we hit Tokyo and we have the actual Olympic Games. And they plan to enforce this Rule 50 that essentially says if you protest in any way, any kind of racial injustice, that you will face penalties. And the interesting part of this, the hypocrisy, is that meanwhile in Geneva, Switzerland, just yesterday, the UN human rights chief issued a landmark report urging countries worldwide to do more to help end discrimination, violent, systemic racism against Black people, and to make amends. And so you have one thing coming out of Geneva, Switzerland, that's supposed to represent the world, saying, countries, you need to make amends and fix this. And you have another thing coming out of Switzerland via the IOC saying we are going to completely and totally ignore oppression, and anyone who in any way brings that to light or brings it up while we are on the national stage of the Olympics will be penalized.
A lot of cats get it twisted that own stuff. The Olympics should not get it twisted as if they own the people. They own the franchise, but they do not own the people. And we look at our own domestic professional sporting industry, where we have owners in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball. You own the franchise, you do not own the people. However, they have operated in a way that has literally taken away the independent expression of individuals during peaceful protests. You don't get more peaceful than being on the sideline taking a knee. They didn't have any problem when a player would take a knee in the NFL to pray to white Jesus. They had no problem with that. But you have a problem when somebody in the NFL takes a knee to protest the treatment of Black and brown people as it relates to law enforcement in America. You don't have a problem with the knee. You have a problem with why the knee was taken.
Yep, and the thought that, hey, you are acknowledging or bringing to mind the oppression that you have sustained, and we want to pretend it doesn't exist. We want white supremacy, the patriarchy. We want all the systems of oppression to flourish, and when you bring them to light, when you acknowledge them in some way, no matter how you do it, whether it is with force or it's nonviolence, that's the problem. And the thing is we're past the point of sitting back and taking it. This is not gonna happen in terms of, hey, we're just gonna ignore it and act like this isn't a problem. It is a problem, and it's something that we are facing, and we're gonna speak out.
Speaking of problem, Sucker Carlson. So he has now gone on record on his show. This is so interesting. He is now alleging, I'm gonna try to get through this story without laughing. He is alleging that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is spying specifically on him in an effort to take his show off the air. He led in by saying that this war on terror is now being waged against American citizens. And he is considering himself to be a victim of the American government. Now, how does Tucker Carlson know this information? Well, according to Tucker, he decided, or he engaged with some conversation with some mysterious individual who was able to reveal text messages and emails that only he had access to, and it was all part of a story he was working on. And they plan to leak this information in order to take his show off the air. Now, I have a few questions. Number one, if you're working on a legitimate story and they release your legitimate correspondence for that legitimate story, who would take you off the air for that? It's a legitimate story. Unless if there's something else happening here. So Carlson said on his show that he had sent a Freedom of Information Act request related to an alleged information gathered by the NSA and other agencies on his show. Here's the breakdown of some of the reports. The department seized phone records of 3 Post reporters. This was a real case, by the way. The department seized phone records of 3 Post reporters. And all of these Post reporters, in 2017, the DOJ sought phone records, email records, CNN Pentagon reporter Barbara Starr covering her communications in June and July of 2017, and the list goes on. Here's the point. When all of these actual journalists were being investigated by the federal government, Tucker Carlson had not one word to say to defend them. So I don't know if Tucker is telling the truth or not about him being under investigation or him being spied upon by the NSA. But here's some of what he said.
Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the US government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim, and ordinarily we'd be skeptical of it. It's illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America. But unfortunately, they do happen, and in this case, they did happen. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that.
You confirmed it with who, Tucker? A mysterious individual. You cannot cite the source. You can't even cite the story. You won't give us a hint as to what the story's about. Here's a great idea. If you really believe the NSA is coming after you, sir, I suggest you go ahead and let us know what it's about, so that if it comes out, we can all be prepared because you told us the truth from the beginning. All of this smoke and mirror commentary. Adrienne, here's what I think, sister. And maybe I'm wrong, but here's what I believe is happening. I think Tucker Carlson has some information out there on him that's embarrassing. That's what I think. And I think somehow somebody has gotten a hold of it, somehow. And in order to mitigate what happens from this exposure of information, he has made a fantasy story about the NSA, government corruption, Biden coming after him being in the middle of some type of coordinated conspiracy from the government. That is why this information is going to be leaked out to the American public to get his show taken off air. That's just my belief.
All right, so I respect that belief. All I can do is sit here and await and pray that it has nothing to do with a golden shower. But the reality is, what Tucker's doing right now is creating a narrative of victimhood and kind of giving that impression that the government can't be trusted and that he is something worthy of being heard and the government will try to suppress him. But let's say the NSA is actually tracking Tucker Carlson, which it should be, because so many people who jumped into the Capitol uninvited on January 6th said Fox News had indoctrinated them. But really, terrorism, white terrorism from white supremacy groups are the main they're the main threat to our nation. And Tucker broadcasts notions of racial superiority, hostility toward immigrants and marginalized groups, and myths of an embattled white majority. And so as he continues to push these narratives, what he's doing is fueling white supremacy groups and bringing them out into the open and causing them to be more aggressive, as we saw on January 6th. So he needs to be tracked. He also needs to be shut down, but we can't expect Fox to do the right thing.
You know, what's interesting about his words, Adrienne, is that he never said it would be false information leaked. He never said the information was going to be manipulated. He actually pretty much agreed that if it comes out, the information is true. So if the information is true, if the information is legal, if the information is accurate, and if the information is garnered during the collection of information because of your broadcast, why would that risk putting your show off the air? I'm not connecting the dots here. Am I missing something, Adrienne?
Well, the thing is, that's a good question, and I think that's a great point, because they love to distract. As we saw with Matt Gaetz, it's like, look over here, don't look here. And so Tucker Carlson is building that exact same narrative to justify keeping him on the air. But the thing is, he's also done and said just about everything. He's involved in the sexual harassment lawsuits there. Also, what they found out that the person working and writing on his show was running all sorts of fake accounts and involved in all sorts of oppressive, racist, and sexist and homophobic things. And he has said a lot of things that would get a normal person kicked off air. So it makes you wonder, what more is coming?
Yeah, here's what I think Tucker did, Adrienne. I think he watched a rerun of the Will Smith movie, Enemy of the State. And he said, this is a good idea. This is what I'm going to tell people is about to happen to me to cover this information. You got to think about it. The NSA, I mean, that's a heavy gun to come after a guy on TV.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what else is he up to if that is actually accurate and true? But if he is just afraid of having facts come out, that's so typical. So typical. This whole cancel culture. No, it's called accountability. Good luck with that.
Very well said. Very well said. All right, we got a whole lot more of show to go. Don't forget, we have the Bullpen. We have a great debate happening around LGBTQ rights. We're gonna probably throw in some traditional marriage discussion in that as well. But the guy who I'm debating today in the Bullpen, well, he's loads of fun. All right, just trust me on that. We got more. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. Now,
we'll see. Poor
Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone?
Okay, sorry, I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby. You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it, we will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good boss.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. See, don't miss the live show. That's great. Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT, TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
Favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Tank and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning, they seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you guys.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always changed this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT Network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change.
Welcome back to Indisputable. Let me read some of these viewer comments, and thank you all for chiming in. Make sure that you watch us on the YouTube channel, Indisputable TYT. We exceeded our goal last week. We have well over 100,000 subscribers. We had over 2 million views last week alone. That's because of you, all right? So make sure you join that YouTube page, that YouTube channel, Indisputable TYT. Follow us on all social media, Indisputable TYT. And make sure you tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker to subscribe to Indisputable TYT. All right, here are the comments. TYT member Diana says, the day the US makes meaningful slavery reparations for Black Americans is the day an activist like Gwen may decide to put her hand on her heart for the national anthem, for fist raised in solidarity for Gwen. Bless you, thank you for that, absolutely. YouTube super chat. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you, homie. Sean Plebe. This is such a great show. Also, the Bullpen is the most educational segment as long as the person opposite of Doc has done their research. Dr. Rashad is a force to be reckoned with. TYT for life. TYT for life, homie. All the way. And that's why I call it the Bullpen. In baseball, the bullpen is where a pitcher warms up to go out into the game. You watch the bullpen because that is a place where you learn, you warm up, and you go out into the real world and you educate and inform people around you. That's why I call it the bullpen. All right, Charles Massey, Dr. Richey, you and Adrienne are killing it. All caps, by the way. I really enjoy news I can relate to from respected Black professionals. Thank you for your good work. That's awesome. You called me a professional. Nicole Smith says, Fox News disclaimer, the following is a work of fiction. Any similarities between events or individuals living or dead is completely coincidental. That's right, Tucker Carlson does not have a news show. He simply has an entertainment show. Viewers are battling over favorite segments. Adrienne Lawrence, my favorite. You got a bunch of fans, Adrienne. Dr. Sugar Johnson says, here for the bullpen. Pam Monholland says, no, my favorite is I wish a Karen would. It's all good. It's all good. Subliminal Sapper says, conservatives, cancel culture is ruining our country. Also, cancel that person because they don't agree with me. Travis Moore, Tucker needs a safe space where he won't melt. Oh, poor baby. All right, and we got a lot more. Kyle 8315 says, Rashad, I don't know how you listen to these fools enough to get your material for this show without going insane, but you deserve your own Olympic medal for that. Well, let's work on it. Let's write the committee and say debate needs to be an Olympic sport. Let's get on that immediately. I mean, hell, there are some Olympic sports. I'm like, that's a sport? Okay. We got a lot more. That's all I can get you right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is some really, really sad information, a sad story. I'm highlighting these stories because they exist in the context of why police reform is required. It should be mandated by all communities, not just black and brown communities, not just progressive communities, but all communities. Let me take you to Arkansas. A 17-year-old kid, a child, was putting a jug of antifreeze behind the back of his tire so his vehicle would not roll into the officer's car. He had just been pulled over. He was working on his truck. His truck had an issue where if he parked it, it would have a tendency to roll back. So when he got pulled over, he was being courteous to make sure that this vehicle that he was working on did not hit the deputy's car. So he pulled out the jug of antifreeze to put it behind this tire to stop it from rolling back. And this Lonoke County sergeant killed him, shot him in the neck. The deputy is on paid administrative leave. So let me give you some background to this story. During a traffic stop last week in Arkansas, sheriff's deputy shot and killed a teenage boy who was only armed with a neon blue jug of antifreeze, according to the family members. Sergeant Michael Davis, and I've been looking high and low for a picture of this guy. Sergeant Michael Davis stopped 17-year-old Hunter Britton near Cabot, Arkansas at about 3 a.m. last Wednesday, and it's still unclear why. Hunter had been having trouble with his truck when Davis pulled in behind him outside of a local auto repair shop and flashed his emergency lights, according to the account of a 16-year-old riding with Hunter at the time. The shifting linkage in the truck was messed up. So when they pulled up, the truck was rolling back. Jesse Britton told Vice News. That's why Hunter went to get the antifreeze. Jordan King, the teen with Hunter the night of the incident, told local ABC affiliate KATV that Davis didn't say anything to Hunter before shooting him. Said nothing. Killed this 17-year-old kid. I believe the witnesses. I believe these other young people. That's a picture of Hunter with the young lady. Sad. Now, the citizens of Lonoke County, they are protesting. They are protesting this police misconduct, alleged misconduct, and I believe it is misconduct here. They are protesting because the sheriff's office, they have not given the family answers that they deserve. They are protesting because of how the other teenager was treated after they shot and killed the 17-year-old. And here's a little bit of that protest. You see, we dispense truth on this show. So let me say something very sobering to everybody watching this. If you say nothing when they're knocking on your neighbor's door, if you say nothing when they're knocking on your neighbor's door, why don't you think they're gonna end up knocking on yours? We have been screaming and shouting the blood of unarmed black men and women, brown men and women, has been screaming and shouting from the soil. Do something. Do something about out of control policing in the United States of America. But what happened? Even with almost 95% of Americans believing some level of police reform should take place, 58% of Americans believing it should be dramatic. Hell, 51% of Republicans saying police reform is required. No police reform happens. They're not held accountable. Even now, the person who killed the 17-year-old kid who was trying to be courteous by making sure his truck did not hit this cruiser, that person is on paid administrative leave. Now, the state of Arkansas has picked up the case. We will see what happens. We're going to continue to follow it. Adrienne, I want you to give your legal expertise here as an attorney. What do you see? What are the variables you see right away?
Well, the officer is going to have to be in a position where they've got to show that they acted reasonably under the circumstances here to even enjoy any semblance of qualified immunity. And the fact that as you mentioned, being armed with a jug of antifreeze, it wouldn't seem in any way legitimate to me for an officer to confuse that with a potentially deadly weapon such as a gun. But also, I'm sure what the officer is going to say is that this young man was turning such that they weren't sure what he was turning around with. But the reality is that people move and people move in various directions. So for police to always assume that in any way that the person who's moving that I am stopping or speaking with must be using deadly force against me is a huge part of the problem. I just think that is extremely unreasonable, and this child has lost their lives as a result of it. And so we will see how this ends up playing out, but I think we can maybe largely garner that people might give this a little bit more attention in terms of people with power, because this was a promising young white man with a future ahead. And hey, his life was taken. And unfortunately, having a lot of black young men and black young women be murdered by police isn't enough to gain the attention of people in power. But maybe, just maybe this one will be enough.
Just maybe, we'll see what happens. Nothing can bring back the 17-year-old, just like nothing can bring back George Floyd. Nothing can bring back Breonna Taylor. Nothing can bring back the countless young men and women who have been killed by members of law enforcement for simply existing, for simply being there. But we have been saying it's out of control for a long time. But you know what else is out of control? And this is my issue with a lot of people who are protesting this right now. Some of those same people will protect policies like qualified immunity. Let's talk about qualified immunity for a minute. You know, as an attorney, Adrienne, that tort law has a way of checking an industry, checking a profession. Because of the existence of tort law, you have medical doctors better than ever. Still not, 100% perfect, but they're better than ever because there's a liability connected to your profession. And because of this liability, it has caused the profession to analyze itself every year and make sure that you restrict the liabilities associated with that profession, because you do not have the same self-analytical behavior inside of the industry of policing. And because you have qualified immunity, they have no reason to be self-critical, self-analytical of their own industry to lower or restrict their liability as it relates to members of the community. Am I right on that?
Nope, you're absolutely right on that. And for those who aren't really sure what tort liability is, it's essentially harm that you do to another person. That means that I, as a member of society, can sue the other person, whereas criminal law means that you'll have a prosecutor or someone who represents a state or government body suing on your behalf. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The fact is that with tort law, it does create checks on certain industries. So people will get better, because if everyone can sue when you're not meeting standards, then you're probably gonna get right, because hey, it'll end up being pretty costly at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's twofold. One is you start transforming the culture of the industry, and two, you attract a different kind of individual to the industry as well. A person who is well aware of the barriers and the level of accountability involved in the profession.
Yep, and the thing is, like you mentioned with policing, when the barriers aren't very high, and when the standards are extremely low in terms of performance and there is low level of accountability, then you're gonna have a lot of people out here making these gut reactions and responses that are completely and totally unreasonable, but they're not going to change or get any better because there are no consequences. So there's really no incentive.
Let me shift gears just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would. You know what we do? We cover Karens across the country because Karens, well, they're dangerous. This is a different kind of story. And I decided to go Hollywood on you for this one. There's a recent episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Now, I don't watch the show. Maybe you're a fan. I've never seen the show. I've seen different snippets and advertisements for it. But there's a cast member named Sutton Stracke. Sutton Stracke, in, I guess, an attempt to deflect from the conversation, made herself the victim of a conversation about race. She weaponized her white tears, as a Karen typically would, saying, and I quote, "Being called a racist is a virus worse than COVID." Really? Let me take you to the first video. Here it is.
Are you serious with me right now? Are you that girl? I don't see color.
I really don't see color. I don't see race. I don't do it.
The word racist to me is like a virus, worse than COVID. And I can't.
To even get into this upsets me.
See, let me tell you what's happening here. First of all, she's not able to engage in an adult conversation about adult themes. Racism, bias, prejudice is a reality. Now, she's utilizing the ultimate privilege card by equating the microcosm of her belief system and saying that's actually the macrocosm of how every other person believes. She's saying, well, because I don't see color, which by the way is bull and you know it. But she's saying, well, I don't see color, means that she needs to be dismissed from the conversation about race and racism. Now, keep in mind, when you're talking about racism, there is a victim in racism. It's the person that the racist individual is being racist against. But in this conversation, she made herself, I mean, damn, Karen is crafty. She made herself the victim inside of the conversation about racism against black and brown people. Whoa. I gotta say this Karen got some skills. Let me take you to the second video. It gets worse.
That's how I feel too. I literally have laid in bed at night thinking about my conversation with Garcelle.
I don't think you realize the effect that it has on me being a black woman. There's stereotypes that people think that we don't pay for our rent, that we don't tip.
I would never even think about that.
Because you don't have to deal with that.
You were trying to hurt Garcelle as a person, not as a race. Y'all, this is for real. Like, sorry, I get really upset about this and emotional. Yes, I'm the girl that doesn't see color. And that's bad. Why?
This is fascinating. I mean, really. Damn. She is playing the victim. Now, let me remind everyone, we have done more to combat COVID in the last 2 years than we have ever done to combat the epidemic of racism, okay? We have put more resources, emphasis, everything behind COVID than we ever did to combat the effects of racism. And let me remind this Karen and other Karens of the world, not only has racism systemically hurt people of color, especially black people for hundreds of years, COVID-19 has affected people of color even worse because of disparities that exist in our systems of policy, rule, and democracy. So yes, it is real. And I'm sorry that it hurts your feelings to have an open conversation about this. Adrienne, do you watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills? Do you know these people?
At one point in my life, I did watch. I do not any longer. I do not know these people, and well, with good reason. That woman is absolutely nonsense. And as someone who teaches race, oppression systems, inclusion, equity, it's very difficult because I see people respond like this, and it is a form of white fragility, hoping to shift the narrative to focus on that individual as opposed to the systems of oppression that individual benefits from and plays an active role in, whether they are fully cognizant of it or not. And watching it is very difficult because there are people like this individual who they do that and they do it all the time. And the thing is, it only sets us back. It helps reinforce the power structures as they are, and it's just pathetic. Yeah, very well said. We only have a few minutes. Let me talk about the PR wing of the KKK. They are called Sons of the Confederacy, okay? This is more of a public group, and an anonymous hacktivist uncovered that a white nationalist group, the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, had 74 members registered with emails associated with various branches of the armed forces and 91 members with emails associated with active government agencies. This is the same group who filed a lawsuit to have a Confederate statue restored in a predominantly black city in Decatur, that's Georgia, and flew a Confederate flag over a NASCAR race to protest their decision to ban the flag. They also designed a Confederate license plate, which you can still purchase at the Georgia DMV, Sons of the Confederate. There it is. You can purchase that. They are proud. I'm actually good with the fact that they don't wear hoods, but they will get a license tag. I'm glad to know exactly who you are. The data also revealed that there was significant overlap between members of this group and more violent extremist groups, such as the League of the South, a group whose members marched at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. Here are some of the individuals who were outed. Let's go ahead and show their picture and what government agency they work for. So this guy came from a Georgia.gov, mvd.dor, Georgia.gov site. Vote Scott Wyatt. Wyatt represents the 97th district in the Virginia's House of Delegates, which compromises rural counties, north of Richmond, and served as the Confederate capital for much of the Civil War. And the list goes on. I'm actually very happy that they have talked about this. There's another person named Dwayne A.J. Prost, an elected coroner, Osage County, Missouri in 2020, after reaching rank of lieutenant colonel in the US Army National Guard, is also listed as an active member of the group. This person confirmed his damn membership. Prost confirmed his membership, saying that he had joined in the last 4 or 5 years after he discovered a relative had fought for the Confederacy, had attended meetings until around 2 years ago when he became too busy for regular attendance. This man is blaming his dead family member for him joining a white nationalist organization. Yep. They ain't loyal. No, they're not loyal at all. And this is, it's a way to justify joining white supremacist groups. That's what they're looking for, socially acceptable ways to join white supremacist organizations. And so uplifting the Confederacy, a group of individuals who lost against the United States, is they're in for doing that on the low key of just saying, oh, I'm just honoring history, or my ancestors. It's like, just say, I want to be racist, and just go about your way. And that's exactly what many of them are doing. There's another cat, I must highlight him because he's connected to our up and coming minds in collegiate arenas. His name is Danny W. Davis. Mr. Davis is a professor and program director at Texas A&M University and training consultant to the US Army Reserve. You see a theme here? Was also found to be one of the members. He's taught courses with titles like domestic terrorism and the internal threat to America. How do you think he's teaching that course? Look at how strategic these individuals have become. It's no longer Jim Crow, it's Jim Crow Esquire. These folks got a college degree, they're educated, and now they are
using the system of access, the system of education, the systems of law in order to continue their rhetoric. Adrienne, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing is people still want to push this narrative that people who believe in white supremacy, people who sexually harass, people who are homophobic, transphobic, are uneducated, uncouth, lower society. No, they've always been upper echelon individuals looking to control the population, and they continue to parrot this rhetoric and this propaganda so that they can control the power structures. And so when people truly embrace the fact that all of the things that you hear aren't necessarily gospel, that the person may have an agenda to fearmonger and keep me in a certain lane, that's when people wake up and hopefully we actually have change. Until then, everyone is just sheep.
Adrienne Lawrence, legal analyst and host TYT Overruled. Also author of the 2021 Axiom Business Book of the Year, Staying in the Game. How can people get that book?
You can get it anywhere books are sold, as well as in the TYT store. It is available. Staying in the Game just won 2 more awards, International Business Book of the Year, as well as for International Book of the Year for women's issues. It's just an important thing. Invest in your professional future.
So amazing. Congratulations. You deserve all of that success and more. Always a pleasure to have you on Indisputable.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we got a lot more next. Stick and stay. Indisputable.
Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it.
We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of that, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against Fox. I told you we were coming.
I mean, you talk about it when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America.
Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock.
And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country.
November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
you do when I smack you back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like face.
Welcome back to Indisputable. I'm going to read some of these viewer comments. Always remember, follow us, Indisputable TYT, Indisputable TYT. All right, members, TYT member Dana Manning says, I wish Karen would. One of my favorite parts of the program. Well, thank you. Shikata Ghani says, I wore the uniform to defend the Constitution, including this woman's rights to peaceful protest. Most of the people who are offended seem to be lacking a DD Form 214. Very well said. You fight for the right so that people can or choose not to participate in anthems. It's not mandated. Super chat. Another name says, notice how these shootings all too often don't involve a warning. It's not like the kid proceeded despite being told to stop. Judge, jury, executioner. Try just the third one with no trial. Love you, Doc, my new favorite. Love you back and thank you for that and great point. Moon Dragon says, you and Adrienne are the power duo, we want more. Well, you're gonna have more, I guarantee you. J Mike's Movie Nights says, good work, brother, I appreciate you. Adrienne, I'm a follower on Instagram, love your content. Beautiful, Justice for Hunter is trending, by the way. Dragon of Paradise says, Hunter is from my hometown. Thank you for highlighting this story. It's important to highlight all of these stories. Richard Rivera says, I don't see color, I have a black cat. Crazy, right? DOTMH says, straight up government sanctioned assassination. That's what it's coming down to. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a remarkable guest, Ali Noorani, president and CEO of National Immigration Forum and host of the podcast Only in America. Ali, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Richard.
Let's talk about immigration policy. Let's get right into it. America seems to have a schizophrenic relationship with the truth as it relates to immigration policy. Give us your background, your perspective as it relates to American immigration policy.
Well, so much of the immigration debate is what we believe is going to be based on policy, right? We kind of talk about numbers of voters, we talk about, what's the policy idea in Congress, but ultimately at the end of the day, this comes down to the immigration debate comes down to culture and values, who we are as a country, who we used to be, and also who we're going to be, and how do we knit together the range of cultures that make our nation special, and use and create a story that people can relate to, they feel themselves in. That ultimately results in a much more constructive, sane, humane, compassionate approach to immigration policy.
What do you think the American sentiment, I can't say American government, but the American sentiment started to lose its way as it relates to a compassionate connection to immigration policy?
So I've been thinking a lot about actually the last 10 years, and I would actually go back to the beginning of the Syrian refugee crisis, when we started to see millions of Syrian refugees seeking protection from a terrible war in Syria, and they were coming to Europe. That is when we saw really the weaponization of the global migration narrative, both in Europe and then in 2015 here with Donald Trump. As a candidate, he weaponized that narrative to force, if you will, urge 24 plus Republican governors to say they did not want Syrian refugees in their state. And then he was, quite frankly, elected based on an anti-immigrant, anti-refugee message. And that led to over 1,000 changes to immigration policy under the course of the Trump administration, which now the Biden administration is working to reverse, but they need to reverse those changes and tell a different story to the American public.
Why is it so dangerous for immigration policy like Trump's to continue to permeate in the culture as we know it? What's the real impact?
Well, the real impact is, quite frankly, that we will shrink as a country, will become less competitive. Families from big cities to small towns, they will struggle. The tax base will erode. And again, this is not about just those big cities. It is about the small towns and communities across the country who increasingly are relying on immigrants and immigration to revitalize their economy, grow their schools, create new jobs. This is the future of our country, and it's based on our ability to recruit global talent, from the skilled engineer to the skilled farm worker. And we have got a lot of work to do to reverse what President Trump put into place, so that all Americans see the value of immigrants and immigration to them and their families.
Give me your perspective on this, because I've often wondered, when I see 600 factory workers being arrested, right? And a news crew being present because the government tipped them off that they were going to do this massive arrest of undocumented workers. The same federal law that says it is illegal to hire an undocumented worker, the subsection of that federal law also says it's illegal for the worker to be there. So both are against the law. Why do we not see the owners of the companies, the CEO, the COO, the hiring manager, the human resources director, the job recruiter, why do we not see them being arrested as well?
Well, because right now with our broken immigration system, they are the only ones who are benefiting. Because of a broken immigration system, the undocumented immigrant worker is being exploited. The legal immigrant is being exploited. The US citizen worker is being exploited, because that unscrupulous employer can push down the wages and the protections for all workers, and it's a rush to the bottom. Through a functioning immigration system, all workers will be able to compete for the same job at the same wage, and unscrupulous employers will not have this leverage over the working American. What's the solution? The solution is really three-pronged. One, the first part of this is for the undocumented immigrant community, approximately 10, 11 million people, get them on a path to citizenship. Ensure that they and their families can own the American dream. Second, create a functioning legal immigration system that creates a process through which immigrants can go through, instead of, quite frankly, turning their lives over to smugglers and human cartels and hoping they can present to ask for protection. And number three, and this is the hard part, but it's very important, is to have a security system, an immigration security system, an immigration enforcement system that is humane, compassionate, but also effective. I think the Biden administration needs to really make the case that they have a new approach to border security and interior enforcement, one that treats immigrants humanely, but also keeps our nation safe.
Biden is moving too damn slow for me. Do you agree with that sentiment, or you're of the mindset he needs more time?
Well, I think he's doing some great things, and there's some other things that I think he's kind of moving far too slowly on. I mean, they are checking the boxes and really working through that list of 1,000 plus changes that Trump made and reversing them. Some amazing things are happening that I think are incredibly important to the health of the country, the health of the immigrant, and to health of all citizens. But the things that they're kind of moving slowly on are, for example, the refugee resettlement program. In Afghanistan, there are tens of thousands of Afghan nationals who helped our military during that war. We should be moving quickly, like yesterday, to evacuate them from the country, get them to a place like Guam, so their applications for special immigrant visas can be processed and they can get to the US for protection. Because they helped us, we should be able to help them. I mean, that's one issue that, quite frankly, is kind of under my skin in terms of the Biden administration moving far too slowly to protect these people who helped us.
Yeah, that situation is so sad, but it shows you the dysfunction of American imperialism and colonization. And this is why people tend to say, no, I know things are messed up, but we don't want your help, America, because of situations like this. Tell people how they can follow you on social media.
Sure. So our website is immigrationforum.org. My Twitter handle is ANOORANI, and my Instagram handle is Ali Noorani, NOORANI.
Ali, keep doing the work, brother. We appreciate you being on Indisputable.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't want to go anywhere. We got the Bullpen coming up, and it will be a lively one. Stick and stay. It's Indisputable.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was too strong coffee? Yes, new twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks has just passed another milestone. 15 billion views.
Damn.
All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me, or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right?
Wow, man.
I can see the void.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted.
Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
I'm Nina Turner, and we are on the road to revolution, baby.
Hello, somebody. And I know sometimes people talk about the angry black woman, but I'm gonna tell you something. If you ain't mad as a mofo about what's going on here, something is wrong with you.
You know, people ask me all the time, what are the lessons from 2020? Is that progressives have to get more organized and we got to come together. We have to be as agile as neoliberals. The progressive movement has to understand that it's not just enough for us to have the right ideas. We are right on most of the ideas. We're not perfect, but we're 99% right because it is a humanitarian agenda, but we must get the power. We have to come together in a more unified way so that we utilize our power strategically to topple neoliberalism, and it's gonna happen.
Welcome back to Indisputable. Let me read some of these comments. All right. I can't get to everyone, but I can get to a lot of you. Make sure you follow us on Indisputable TYT. Indisputable TYT. TY member Enoch Sound says, Chuck D said, these days you can't see who's in cahoots because now the KKK wears a 3-piece suit. Yes. Tiger Katsune says, current job was raided by ICE 2 years ago. No one was punished except those deported. Nowadays, the company does, Nowadays, the company does questionably illegal stuff to us instead. Sorry to hear that. Non-human humanist says, arresting 600 migrant workers. The employer just saved himself 600 wages, right? Illegal workers can't unionize, can they? Yeah. Amy K. Blue on Twitch says, Dr. Shaw, love your show. Do you have a resource for me where we're able to write up a petition statewide to prevent news stations that provide misinformation? It is a good idea to work on the state level since it is harder to get it done on the federal level. Well, do me a favor. Make sure you tag me on social media and I'll be back in touch with you about that, okay? I would love to help you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, I have Bryson Gray, Christian conservative artist, producer, and personality. Bryson, welcome to Indisputable. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man. So we talked a little bit about this before the show, and I mentioned to you that I'm actually good friends with Lecrae, who's a Christian artist. And I asked you, since you are a Christian entertainer, or Christian artist yourself, had you had any contact with Lecrae? And you said to me that he's kind of lukewarm for you. And you mean that in the context of his faith belief, right?
Yeah, and me and him have had situations because I've tried to contact him. I contacted him privately before, but he denies the word of God in front of man, which is disgusting in my opinion.
Got you. You are a big anti-abortion guy, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume you take that from your biblical principles or the values you have received from the Bible.
Starts with that, but it's really just common sense. Even if you don't believe in the Bible, it should be common sense to be against abortion.
Okay. So let me ask you this: are you for war?
Am I for war?
Correct.
I'm against war. Take our troops out of pretty much all of these countries to stop messing with other countries.
That actually has some intellectual integrity. Are you also anti-death penalty?
I'm becoming that way. So sometimes I struggle with it because emotionally, when you see somebody messing with little kids and stuff of that nature, you want to say, I don't like that. But just to be clear, when I talk about pro-life, I'm talking about abortions, period. So I'm referring to abortion.
Well, that's the context that you would like it to only apply to. But if you utilize the phraseology pro-life, well, now I need to understand, how do you consider life in different contexts? For example, if you are a pro-life person, then I would expect you to also be pro-funding for adoption centers or pro-funding for community homes that deal with children. I was a foster child myself. So I would imagine if you're pro-life, you're also pro-life for those that are outside of the womb, is my point, right? Outside of the womb.
Well, you want to have a conversation about outside the womb, but I'm specifically dealing with inside of the womb. So I'm dealing with abortion specifically. I'm anti-abortion. It should be illegal. Very simple.
Okay, because you believe life begins at conception?
Yes, I believe the definition of a cell is the smallest form of life by definition in biology. So then if you apply that to a human, we're talking about a human cell. So then if that's human life and you're taking it away, then obviously you shouldn't be able to do that.
Let me be graphic with you. Does sperm have a cell?
Yes.
Is that a human being?
No, I know. That's what I said, the smallest form of life. So if you talk about a human cell, when a sperm goes into the egg okay, I'm not going through that. We all know what happens. And then when it starts growing, obviously it's doing that. And that's why you here, that's why I'm here. That's why everybody's here right now, is because of that right there. So let's not play these little weird games. We know exactly.
We're not playing games, brother. Okay. We're having an open conversation. Because if your faith belief informs you of your stance on a woman's right to choose, let's be okay with challenging the conversation. And I will let you speak and I'll speak. So let me pose this question to you. When we talk about life, we're not talking about biological function, because there's a lot of biological function. We can spit on the ground and there's biology in the spit. You're not trying to save the spit, brother. So we're not talking about biological function. We're talking about a soul being placed inside of the body and a soul being present inside of the womb. That's what we're really talking about, correct? That's what makes it life.
No, I made what I said very specific. That's why I said when somebody releases a sperm and it comes with the egg and it starts creating life, when that come together and life starts growing, period. That's a human cell. So the fact that you're taking that away, and let's not act like that's when most abortions happen. Most abortions happen later than that, which is more disgusting. So later we start doing that is murder. And not only it should be simply illegal. No, I don't want no exceptions.
All right, so what about in cases of rape?
No exceptions.
In cases of molestation?
No exceptions.
In cases of incest?
No exceptions.
Now, let me go back to your ideology about where life begins. We can all agree that in the story of Adam and Eve, or Iadarola, that Adam was a biological entity first. And this biology that had the format of life, cells were functioning. There was a biological process, because according to the text that you say informs your belief on abortion, God created Adam, or God created man. So now you have your biology. But man did not become living, brother, which means Adam, as a biological entity, according to the scripture, was not living until something happened to Adam. What happened to Adam that made him a living soul?
I know what you're about to say. God breathed breath into him, but my answer is that God knew you before the womb, before you was in the womb.
Okay, so you answered the question that in the scripture that you base your opinion on, or base your faith value on, that Adam was actually a biological creature, a biological presence that had the function of life. However, scripture says that is not what made him living. He did not become living until there was a respiratory function, until God breathed into Adam, and the Bible says Adam thus became a living soul. So that means that Adam can exist biologically first without actually being living second.
There's a huge problem with this comparison you're using. The huge problem is Adam wasn't born of a woman. He was the first man created by God. And then the woman Eve was created from the rib. That's why I brought up the other scripture that said, I knew you even before you was in the womb. Period. And that's quite simple. One of the things God hates is a shedding of innocent blood.
Well, let's go back to that. And I appreciate the conversation, brother. You and I disagree totally on the concept here, but I appreciate the open conversation. Now, the scripture you just mentioned is actually in Jeremiah 1. And God is specifically talking about Jeremiah the prophet. And the wording is, before you were in the womb of your mother, I knew you, I ordained you a prophet unto the nation. So just as you utilize the scripture in the book of Genesis to apply to a one-time situation, why do you not use the scripture in Jeremiah to apply specifically as it is stated to a one-time situation?
I gave you another scripture, you ignored it.
Okay, what was the other one? Where is it at?
I said one of the 6 things God hates is the shedding of innocent blood.
Well, we understand that, brother. And once again, that is in reference to life. And we've already established that you can have biology without having life. That's according to the text that you read in Genesis.
Are babies in a womb as they're growing? Is that not life?
I do not believe they are. No, I do not believe that's a living soul. Sir, you asked me, hold on, brother. You asked me a question. The answer to your question is, I do not believe an embryo is a living soul until there is a respiratory function. That's my belief. Your belief can be different than mine.
So as they're growing and as they're getting basically food from the mother and getting everything from the mother as so they can grow. You're telling me that is not a living thing?
No, I do not believe that's a living soul. So I do believe it has the biology or the biological processes of life, just as your spit does or other elements connected to your body. But I do not believe it is an actual living soul. That is what I believe. Yes, let me take you to a policy. You do realize,
just real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, when you use a spit, it's very interesting, and you're using the term "living soul" instead, soul instead of life. I see why you're using that. But we talk about spit. Spit is a totally different ballgame because a spit is not growing. It's not. It's not growing. It's not getting bigger. It's not learning how to do things. It's not functioning that way because spit is obviously not life.
I got you, brother. And you have your belief, and I respect your belief and your value system. So you're a guy, you want to see less abortions happen in America. Do you support Republicans politically?
I'm a conservative. Republicans are starting to go towards further left, so they have pissed me off as of late.
But you do support conservatives that are, I guess, anti-abortion, right? Or anti-woman's right to choose. You support them.
I support that specific policy.
Okay, let me read to you some actual data. Now, this is not a projection. This is what has already happened. During the last 30 years, that's a long time, brother. The most dramatic decrease in abortion rates in America has happened under Democratic presidents, not Republican presidents. Republican or conservative presidents have either kept it the same or increased the number of actual abortions in the United States. Let me read some stats. Per 1,000 women, Reagan from 1981 to 1989 had the number at 24 per 1,000. This was rates per every 1,000 women, according to the CDC. H.W. Bush had it at 24, which kept it steady. Clinton had it at 16.2, which dropped it. Bush had it at 16 as well. And then President Obama gets in and he dramatically decreases it to 11. All right, so the most dramatic and the only decreases of actual abortion rates in the United States of America happened under Democratic presidents, which would mean if you're considering saving more lives, if you believe that abortions or abortion is murder, then you have to consider voting for a Democrat and not a Republican, because under conservatives, the abortion rate actually increases, and under Democrats, it actually decreases.
Well, none of them statutes you brought up affects me at all, because like I've made clear multiple times, I want it illegal, meaning it shouldn't happen, period. So them stats has no effect on me.
All right, you do realize how ridiculous it sounds when you say you want a person who was raped to be forced to have a child. You want a girl, a child who was molested to be forced to have a baby. You realize how dumb as hell that sounds, right?
Well, it wasn't the baby that raped that person, so I don't think that's an exception.
Say that again.
The baby that's growing inside of you didn't rape you, didn't molest you. The man hopefully is in jail and or dead. But
wait a minute. So you want that person punished for taking away the choice of another individual, but you don't want that individual to have a choice as it relates to carrying the embryo into term.
No, incorrect. I want that person to be punished for raping and or molesting. I know a lot of times people try to use blanket terms like a choice, so you can use that in another place, but no, I'm specifically talking about raping and molesting because you said those words.
This is fascinating. So, and what's interesting, Bryson, is that there's a policy, or at least it existed temporarily in the state of Alabama. Alabama passed a law, and I'm sure you were very happy about this law until the court overturned it, that said even in cases of rape, abortion would still be illegal in Alabama. That law did get overturned, but keep in mind, it did get passed. And literally in Alabama, a person would get more time for aborting the fetus than what the rapist would get for raping the woman. Does that make sense to you?
No, I don't agree with that last aspect. Okay. Obviously, the person that raped the woman needs to get life. Any person that rapes somebody should get life in prison. But I do like the fact that they did that law outside of that last part.
Do you have children?
No, but I will. I have 3 siblings.
You have sisters?
I have a little sister, correct.
You ever thought if somebody raped your little sister, you wouldn't want her to have the child of the rapist, or at least have her?
Nope, my sister, she will have the child.
Because you will force her to have it?
Nope, because she was a Bible-believing Christian like me, and she doesn't believe in abortion.
So if your sister, God forbid, was raped,
we could talk to her. She's upstairs.
You would, well, I can have on the show another time. I'm talking to you today.
Okay.
You would counsel her to not have an abortion, but to in fact have the child of the rapist.
I already know she would have it, but I will tell her you better not get no abortion. All three, I was like, do not get no abortion. I tell everybody that who even thinks about having an abortion. I talk to people in my DMs sometimes think about having an abortion, but it's never really based on rape. We argue on something that's very rare. The majority of cases is convenience. Women just want convenience because women want to be out here having sex with who knows what, when no, and who nobody knows, and then they want to get an abortion. So it's usually out of convenience, but you haven't brought that up once.
And that's because women have talked to you and told you this?
It's just per statistics. Every statistics, rape is like less than 2% of abortions.
Why do you think the number of abortions actually decreases under Democrats and typically increases or stays the same under Republicans? Why do you think that is?
Genuinely, I do not know. But what I care? No, because I want it to be illegal. So what I do know is,
so you don't care about the actual fetuses or the embryo. You don't care about that. You just care about this one damn law. You don't care about the actual preserving of life. You don't care what the number is. You just care about this one issue that is a law that you want to see passed. You don't care what the actual numbers are.
Incorrect, sir. I'm not saying it's not a positive if abortions were decreased, but what I do know, and the reason I said I don't care, what I do know is if it was illegal, them numbers would decrease significantly because you would have to take a risk to go get an abortion illegally.
That's another untrue statement.
So many statistics from before it was
legal. You will have, well, we do have some stats of illegal abortions that led to the death of the mother. Because they were utilizing clothes hangers and people created a black market system so that you can go and seek these abortions. The bottom line is, brother, that women have had this choice legally or illegally, and instead of focusing on the policy that you're trying to push, which is completely adversarial to any common sense known to man, to push that kind of ideology without respecting a woman's right to choose, especially in situations that are egregious as rape, brother, I'm disappointed.
But I do believe in a woman's right to choose. Because in most cases, it's convenience. She can make that choice in the bedroom, just like she make every other choice in her life. So once you make that choice in the bedroom, you have to deal with, you a grown adult woman in most cases. You need to deal with what you just did. So you can't just get rid of your responsibilities and take away a life because of you convenience. Stop being a little thought.
That's what they are to you, their thoughts to you.
Yeah, promiscuous women, correct.
Yeah, you got a woman?
Yes, I have a girlfriend, yep.
Okay, and you don't have children?
No, but just real quick, my girlfriend was actually adopted at 2 years old, and she was raised by wonderful parents, which is another reason why I'm very pro-life. I was already pro-life, but just that alone, and she's a very intelligent woman, and her mother is left for the time.
I'm glad you said that. I was a foster child myself. Do you advocate for stronger policies to make sure foster children have access to higher education, to opportunities in the marketplace, job training skills, etc.? Do you advocate for that?
Job training skills, yes. I'm not a fan of these universities. I think people need to homeschool their kids.
Oh, that's a shock. You're not a fan of college. Okay, that's a shock.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, just school period, not just college. It's public school system, private school system. No matter what it is, all they're doing is indoctrinating our children. That's why a lot of liberals, they claim that they didn't become liberals until they left college.
I got you, man. That's just, I mean, this has been I don't know, interesting. I can say that. So are you a big MAGA guy? Are you a Trumpite?
I'm gonna talk about Trumpite because I'm God first, obviously. But I do support Trump. But right now I'm still focused on 2020, not really worried about 2024. I'm surprised we didn't get to the LGBT stuff.
But you know, wait a minute, it's 2021 though, brother.
Yeah, the election was obviously stolen, in my opinion. I thought we have. Well, you're laughing, but why?
Yeah, I'm laughing at you. You're absolutely correct. You called that one. That's the first true thing you said on this show.
Why are they trying to block audits?
Okay, brother. What's really interesting about all of this is that the places that are having audits, the audits are not being blocked. Georgia has had multiple audits. Arkansas has had multiple audits. A lot of states had audits. But you also have judges that were appointed by Donald Trump who said to these cases of election fraud, these are frivolous cases. So you mean to tell me that judges appointed by Trump himself decided to engage in a massive conspiracy to steal the election from Donald Trump? And this included not only judges, but also all of the Republican governors, all of the White House staff, and including Mike Pence himself. You think it was that kind of massive cover-up, correct?
Well, if you look into what the judges he appointed did, and granted, I do agree with you that he, in my opinion, Trump sometimes his judgment of character is a little off. But
a little off?
Yeah, but the judges he appointed, nobody didn't even give a real investigation into the cases. And like I said, I was surprised we didn't. I mean, it's true. I was surprised we didn't get to the LGBT stuff, because you'll be more shocked at my views on that.
Okay. What's your, and we got like 2 minutes, man. You wanted to say something about LGBTQ rights?
Well, and censorship, we didn't get to that. But of course, I want same-sex marriage illegal, common sense. But also, as far as censorship, social media companies, especially the ones that are publicly traded, shouldn't have these like these Section 230 immunity things surrounding them. Because my music just got banned on some of the biggest platforms in the country, as far as Spotify and SoundCloud. Yeah. And how can you ban my music but still have music about murder? And
let me tell you why private companies can do that, and it is not antithetical to the Constitution. Your freedom of speech is a freedom that does have restrictions. Now remember, your freedom of speech basically says the government cannot do anything to intrude on that freedom, right? Or penalize you for having said freedom when you exercise that freedom. But private companies, for example, TYT is a private company. Indisputable is a show at this private company. If I wanted you to be off my show, I could just cut your mic. I haven't violated your constitutional rights. Maybe I've offended you, brother, but I have not violated your constitutional rights. So when you make a constitutional argument,
I didn't,
because of a private company, what they decide to do with your music, that doesn't equate. It's not a constitutional issue.
You brought up Constitution. I said nothing about the Constitution.
So you're just saying private companies should do what you want them to do?
No, incorrect. But okay. if you're gonna ban my music,
okay,
you have to ban other music similar to that.
Like well, they don't have to, brother. They don't.
And this is where we get into the thing.
They're not Christians like you, brother.
Oh no. And now this is the argument. Now my argument is discrimination, right? Y'all like that word?
Oh, discrimination. I got it.
But it is discrimination. I can prove it's discrimination by emails, and I can pull up 1,000 popular songs.
And they're discriminating against your lyrics?
Yes, they are.
Got you, man. All right.
Discriminate against my belief system. Correct.
Gotcha, man. Well, you continue that fight, brother. Do you? All right. I appreciate you being on Indisputable. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Before I exit, let me read some of the comments, okay? MJ Jackson says almost most conservatives, also most of conservatives support foreign regimes who have pro-abortion policies like Netanyahu in Israel. So what good is it to be anti-abortion at home but pro-abortion abroad? Good point, Sun Dragon. First Testament, what about all of the babies that died innocently in the wombs of their mother when he flooded the earth? J.R. Alfred says, love the show, keep up the great work. I hope you get to moderate the next president election. We're working on it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to make sure you stay for Deep Dive with Jordan Yule on Twitch. All right, Deep Dive coming up next. Remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of the planet. And remember, the truth is always indisputable.